Call meeting to order with everyone present. First item on the agenda, John Vagts, Helping Services Opioid Task Force update.
I don't know where you want me to.
Greatest chair is up here.
All right. Hello, yep, I'm John Vagts with Helping Services. I'm on the Winneshiek County Opioid Settlement Task Force. So we're kind of a committee that has come together to come up with ideas for the county to use those funds and then bring them to the Board of Supervisors to approve. Just wanted to give a quick update on some of the things that we're working on. There will be a kind of a needs assessment going out to everybody in the county, kind of seeing what everybody's ideas are and how those funds can be used. So that will be going out in the next couple of weeks in newspapers. We'll do some radio announcements for those types of things as well. Again, really just trying to get the county's input on how people want to see those funds used within the confines that we are able to use those funds for. So that'll be going out. It'll be running for the next 3 months. So something to kind of keep your eye out for. Once we get that information together, we can kind of use that to help guide some of that decision making, again, to bring that to you. And then we are looking at doing some different kind of media campaigns, especially with stigma related to substance use disorder, where people can get Narcan in the county, those types of things. So just, again, wanted to give a really brief, quick update on some of the things that we are working on. Any questions from anyone? Where can you get Narcan? Yeah. So it can be free. Helping Services, we're able to give it out for free. The pharmacy at Walmart and Thrifty Whites are also participating in the program to get it for free. And the Narcan is over the counter. So you could go to Walmart or any of the other pharmacies and use it as well. Anywhere from $35 to $45.
You have to give out for free though?
Yes, yep, you can get it for free, yep.
Does public health have it?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Will they be getting it?
That's something we're talking about. So it is a relatively easy thing to sign up to be able to get it for free. They just ask that people attend a training and know how to use it, know what to look for in an overdose. And that's something that I do with my work at Helping Services, is provide that training.
Where are people getting opioids here?
Opioids from here. So a lot of it is fake pills. You can go anywhere online and get things anywhere. Facebook has a lot of different advertisements and stuff that people are able to get them. People are still misusing prescription drugs and stuff like that when they do get them from the doctor. But most of it is coming from the fake pills and stuff that they can get online.
Not buying on the street.
Well, not people can buy it and sell it on the street, obviously, but no, not necessarily. Right, like I said, kind of be looking out for that survey that is going to be coming out again, so that we have an idea of what people who live in the county want to see those funds used for.
Do you want to tell them who's on the task force?
Oh, yeah. So task force, we have Andy Vander Maaten, he is on there, Dan Marks, Chris Webker, Trisha Tyne, Krista Vandenbrink, Sean Snyder, Charlie Woodcock, Carson Egland, Shirley, myself, Annette Franzen, Joe Ward. They are all on the task force. So we have a mixture of law enforcement. I work in prevention and then treatment and health involved in there.
And community.
And community, yes, yep. We do have a community member looking to get somebody from a faith-based area to join us as well, to get some input from them.
Have we had any deaths attributed to it directly that we know of?
So it's hard to get, especially in the counties that I serve, to get exact numbers. It's usually less than 10, and when it's less than 10, the data gets suppressed for confidentiality reasons. So I can say it's less than 10.
But there have been near deaths, and we can ask that of Dan Marks next time he visits, because they do deal with opioid overdoses.
And Northeast Iowa Behavioral Health, they have the treatment side of things, and they do provide treatment to people who have an opioid use disorder or are dealing with those types of things as well. So I don't know what numbers they have in their program or anything like that, but that is an option that we have
Probably
here.
Probably more interesting would be how many times have they administered Narcan?
Yes, yeah.
Either through EMS or the sheriff's office.
And numbers I don't have yet.
Yeah.
Something I'm trying to work on. My grant does have kind of a thing where we have to try to get that information. So it's something I'm working on, but haven't gotten
But
anything yet.
I think it
So,
would be important.
Yeah.
In the meantime, if anybody has access to Netflix, if you watch the mini series called Painkiller, it's a very good example of what has happened in our country with opioid epidemic and the addiction caused by a lot of it through prescription drugs after surgeries. It's a good movie. And how the pharma companies pushed it to doctors to then push it to patients. So it's a good Netflix series.
Yep. And I can see, with that, these companies, they had to pay out, these large amounts of money because they did kind of push that and stuff. That was the first wave of the opioid crisis that we have, was that extra push. That has led to the, later waves that we are dealing with now. People weren't able to get the prescriptions as easily, so they switched to heroin. From heroin, it became not as available anymore and some of that stuff. So then they switched to the fake pills, and that's kind of where we're at now with fentanyl and all that stuff. So, yep, those companies definitely contributed to the beginning of it, and it's something that is still going on and an issue today. In the United States, there are over 100,000 deaths in the last year, specifically related to opioids and fentanyl. So.
Anyone else have anything for John?
All right, thank you very much.
Good
Thank you.
work.
We have on the consent agenda, Pat.
I have claims in the minutes and 3 liquor licenses. Winneshiek Wildberry Winery, Harvest Farm Campground, and Bluffton Bar.
I'd move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion? None. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Carried unanimous. Any committee reports?
There's a signed one going.
Yeah, right here.
Had a hawk meeting on Friday. Some funds were freed up, able to distribute to help give a bonus basically to childcare providers in specifically Kalmaki County, where there's a huge shortage. And actually have are adding several positions, which is positive, so. Pretty good assignment.
Our 6th county meeting last week, I thought was real well planned, organized, and we learned a lot. Joel Fons has put together a letter to our legislatures to talk about the cost of the bridge ratings and how it's really putting a burden on counties. So it's a very well-written letter, and we appreciate his work on that. And Michael Kueny will probably talk more about it during his report, but it was a good meeting.
911 was just the budget hearing. Pretty much all that was.
How close are they to going live? Still got
There should be 2 north towers here. This could be happening maybe this week, and the other ones will be, then they gotta move a unit off the Burr Oak Tower over this way. But yeah, that will be
Yeah.
getting there.
I should say last week again.
Had a CSS meeting in Presco. We'll talk about the consolidation from regions to districts again, and the uncertainty of how that's gonna work. And the way they're petitioning to get several counties back into our, what would be district that really logically belong in this corner of the state together, but hopefully they'll be able to get that taken care of, but it didn't make sense why they dropped them off there. Because they're neighboring counties to us and everyone else. But I think they probably just went by populations and whatever, I don't know.
The original regions were formed voluntarily by the counties, so our region had at one time 20 some, and then there were disagreements about funding, and so the counties were putting in the money, and different counties wanted to tax different amounts, and so they have regions, then our region ended up splitting, and so, but now it's not county tax money anymore, so the state's money's running it, so they might as well put the region the way that makes most efficiently, rather than what was left over from before. Yeah, we had quite an issue there for a while because the board set a levy rate that everyone in the county and the region was supposed to levy. And there were a few counties that said, oh, we don't want to levy that much and just levied less. So then they weren't putting their share in the region, and it was quite an ordeal for a while there.
So now there'll be districts.
Yeah.
All right, next on the agenda, 9:45, Mike Kueny, County Engineer, Road Department updates.
Well, I got one. I printed one. I didn't know.
Okay, email engineer's report. And Shirley asked me to print this off from the engineer's meeting. Pass it as the discrete and expenses.
This was from Clayton.
That was from Clayton.
Clayton, yeah.
Most of those expenses will transfer one for one to, yeah, I mean, it'd be almost, we would have to give me fair pricing for certain things in Clayton County. So, yeah, I just asked Casey to send that over, and he did. I just walked through the report here. I attended with the rest of the board. I think all the board showed up to that 6-county meeting. I agree that was a good meeting. For Shirley's earlier comment, Joel talked about that. The issue with the bridge ratings and everything else, basically describing it as an unfunded mandate, and that relates to the all systems permit that was passed before I came in. So I don't remember all the details on that all systems permit. This comes from the all systems permit that we have to prepare Winneshiek County for. So I'll be working with the rest of the Iowa County engineers on what it is I need to do and the DOT on that. Next on the list is I'm continuing my NACO leadership training. The other things I'm doing, I'm going around because after discussions with Ben on all of this budget stuff, we're forecasting a relatively flat income, and the increased costs are not expected to go down. So I'm trying to make sure that crew and staff and everybody gets paid, and I'm trying to figure out ways to make that all happen amicably throughout the county engineering department. And on Monday, I met with Mark Valdette and Steve Kelsey. I thought that went well. And W14 update, we have full SHPO clearance on everything, so that's good. That's an upgrade. We have yet to get a final sign off on NEPA for the Fort Atkinson portion. So that is expected to come this week.
according to the staff. Citizen request, ongoing thing. Updating budget and work on 5-year program is progressing. I would say the budget, if needed numbers today, I feel good with what I have. I had one question for Nick in an email, and he sent me a reply right over the weekend, and I feel good about what I can send you right now if you needed it. And the 5-year plan is ongoing. There was discussion of the 5-year plan to incorporate upper Litchfield distributions for fiscal year 2028. It is Winneshiek County's turn. The way it works, all the different counties, some of the cities have a turn, and it'll be our turn fiscal year 2028. Staff came up with 5 alternatives. We can discuss those at any time privately. What is most important to the 5 of you? I'd love to hear from you on that. And then this week I have a busy week in terms of just training, because I'm signed up for the funding training down in Lynn County on Wednesday, Thursday, and then I'm going to be here in this room on Friday for the DOT county engineer training to get to all the new county engineers. So that's my report. Any questions?
On that W14, you said there's some question about enough funding, where you would like to cut it back to a 3-inch lift.
Oh, on that email. So I have some scribbles here. So on that email, we're required to be at the beginning of our letting. We have to be under 2 years for the letting. We have to have 2 years, negative 2-year balance, expected balance. And so we'll have to pay the farm to market account ahead of time. If we go with 4-inch, and depending on how it works with the 3-inch as well. But there's a couple of things. The Main Street portion and Spillville, if it gets let separately and later, we will likely be able to use funding from the Main Street portion to pad our FM account.
That's what I was thinking.
And so how that works out, and that's going to be a meeting. I plan on at least one of our staff members to go to the Spillville meeting on February 6th. I want to go to that. I've just had some personal things come up that may not be able to attend, but I'm still looking to go to that on February 6th to discuss that. Staff has discussed the specifics with me on why they think that 3 inches is a good option to do, even if we can't get 4 inches. And we may be able to get 3.5 inches with good quotes from the queries.
I really think we need 4 inches, especially on that little bridge with all that.
There's a lot of traffic because of Lynch.
Well, it just
And
traffic, just traffic in general.
It's a lot of.
So if we'd have to take out the city limits part of Spillville in order to have enough money to put the 4-inch lift on the rest, I think that would be well worth it at this point in time, and then we can always go back.
Yeah.
That would give Spillville the time to secure funding for their own side of the sidewalks and everything else.
Yeah, we got.
That's good feedback. So again, I'm working with staff who knows construction side of this and the craftsmanship, and the idea is that they really want to get this in, and fall is a better time to construct. So 4 inches with Spillville coming in the following year, that's certainly a funding option that hasn't been outlined yet.
Sure.
In terms of how the funds get there, but I would say that if you want 4 inches, that would be.
I'd
right
be
way to go.
definitely, yeah.
You're better off.
Just,
The issue, see, we got a conflict with Spillville City putting water main extensions and above ground storage at the south end of the town. So it's gonna be, all of that timeline would probably fit best if Spillville was pushed.
And yeah, Steve said it almost perfectly as far as I'm concerned. Again, it's still left for June and the funding agreements is something I will be working on this week to swap around as is. And because you just gave me this feedback, I'm gonna put number 1 as being that 4 inches.
I would definitely, I mean, yeah.
And again, this can change, but if that's, I mean,
For
for
what
3 board members right here saying they want the 4 inches, that's important feedback.
I've had some input from people in the construction business too, and they said.
I mean, for what the cost difference is, the initial investment we're putting in, what is it, $300,000 difference between 3 and 4 inches? I
Longevity.
mean, you're there doing it, they're putting it down, just all we're buying is the product.
But with the all systems
it's no-
permit and the increase in tonnage allowed, I think we need the best strength we can get, so we don't have to replace it so soon. But I'd be
So-
curious to know what even 4 inches will hold up to with that new weight limit and
2,000.
the permits.
Those are, I can look into that for you.
Yeah.
I can't tell you right now.
One thing,
Anyway,
I'm
we
sure
can
glad we
squeeze
put
the
you
4
over
in
down.
and get it done in the fall. I would definitely recommend. If we gotta shave a little something, some other place to get or how that all works, I'm not 100% sure, but if we can,
Well, I will make sure that
I would
that's gonna be priority
Yeah.
to make sure that it's in there. Thank you for the
Yeah.
feedback.
definitely.
Yeah, they're with the water lines going in and the sandy soil conditions that are in Spillville. And what could happen with that trench line and so forth.
You'd be better off putting it in, let it sit a little while before you do it anyway. 'Cause
It
It's
would.
gonna bust up.
It's
Yeah.
not gonna be, and there's the amount of truck traffic goes down Main Street through that stretch of 14 every day
Yeah.
with Lynch is.
And you already
severe.
had it divided as 3 separate projects, so you'd really be just leaving one that goes out. You already had it as north of Spillville, in Spillville, and south of Spillville. So if we go in June with just the north and south portions and leave the Spillville out, you'd already have it planned that way.
Correct.
Okay.
We have separate plans for each of those.
Yeah.
And
so I
we're
would-
working with the,
Where does Fort fall into those plans? Which plan is that?
The south of,
Just coming down the edge of town. so.
Could that be left out too?
Don't
then?
need-
There's nothing. it's
There's
just
only
just
about a
on the edge
one
of
block
town.
section that's of
Yeah,
any
that's
real concern that
same idea is that we want to get the mobilization price to be as small as we can on this. We would like them to do the same, all things being equal.
and the same on the north part that goes into Ridgeway, just a few hundred feet. So
Yeah.
that's why that one's included too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely do the 2 and
Okay,
if we could get that, that would
this
Be
is why
huge.
This is why
Would
we
be
talk,
huge.
so.
that'd be huge. Yeah. Appreciate it.
Let's do it right.
Okay,
Yep.
the city of Spillville will want it, but they'll learn to understand that it's the best way that we have to go, really.
Okay.
I'm concerned about that. I mean, because when they put sewer in there years ago, some of those trenches were so deep, they had huge, big trench lines in there.
Yeah.
And we don't need, that's really gets difficult.
That way it takes the pressure off them from having to get it. I mean, yeah. Being pushed to shove and we don't have to wait for it, so we do the 2 and that's the biggest thing is to get the roads.
Yep.
Yeah. Through Spillville. I mean,
We could get
they
by.
need it, but it
We
ain't.
can get by with Spillville.
so just so we're clear, at the farmer market, monies, that's $240,000. I will be pushing all $240,000 into the Spillville Main Street project, the farmer market money. Or excuse me, not the farmer market money. The federal funding, and pushing that federal funding into the proposed project for a 4-inch. So that way it reduces our farm to market burden.
Yep.
And it's 240,000, then I'm gonna ask Upper Explorerland, I'll ask Aaron Detter to see if we can't also get the swap funds, $60,000 to make it a total of $300,000 to swap to. I don't know how that all works exactly, so I'm gonna be trying to get all that I can to a 4-inch project.
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
Thank for the direction on that.
Yeah, thank you. For giving us a heads up, or, you know, putting it out in front of us.
Any further questions?
I have none.
Should do it. Thank you.
Yes.
Gonna be soupy roads this week.
With no moisture underneath, so
I'm seeing some,
it'll soak up a lot of her.
yeah, I've seen a lot of sunspot downtown line when I was going down there yesterday.
You get down to 20s at night, it'll help a lot.
It's 10 o'clock. Next on the agenda, we have a public hearing, for the National Flood Insurance Program Ordinance.
I motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to open the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Public hearing is now open. Have anyone with any questions or comments about the National Flood Insurance Program?
Dan, Den's, you want to speak?
Go ahead.
Well, I don't know, he didn't have his hand
Well,
raised.
I'm
Mark,
personally, I'm against it. The biggest thing is maps. In my yard, it takes most of my yard away from me. And we've lived there for 40 years, over 40 years. And I've never seen the water where the maps are. And we've had no waves and other flood events. And I have no recourse to have the maps changed without a lot of expense. And make a few notes. Takes about 1.25 acres out of my yard from where the flood normally would be at. Question on what would be required for permits if you wanted to do something in the yard. You need an engineer, you need a surveyor. Be all the same expenses as a commercial one trying to build behind Walmart or something in a floodplain would be required. Question why you can't be ag exempt. And 15 pages seems a little excessive. That's just my.
All right, so I'm Tony Phillips. I'm the zoning administrator and I got stuck with doing the floodplain stuff too. 15 pages, why is ag not exempt? This all comes from FEMA. This is federal, okay? That is why. They do not care about exempting farms. They want it all the same. Please remind me of some other questions. I can't remember them all.
Permitting.
What will be required for a permit? Do you
Okay,
need an
so
engineer,
permit.
Surveyor.
Everything that is in the county, except for a small portion of Freeport, is in what's called Zone A. Zone A is defined as the approximate flood zone. So anything that we do in Zone A, you need to get a county permit and a state permit. The state would be the one that decides on, they break it down into floodway or floodway fringe. And then different regulations for each of those two areas, all right? Cost of the permits, do not know. We actually have not even, I have not brought it up to the Board of Supervisors at all for the cost, what this would be. The most expensive zoning permit we have is $250 if you do a subdivision. Building permit, just a normal building permit ranges from, what is it, 20 to 200 for a normal building permit.
Okay, would you need an engineer and a survey to find a foot above the flood line and all of this? So reading in the.
So the DNR is actually going to come up with the flood depth, the base flood elevation. That is one of the things that the DNR will do. So when you apply for a permit, the DNR is gonna say, this is floodway fringe, and the base flood elevation is 849 feet, whatever. So after that, you will be required to have a surveyor or an engineer to do the elevation certificate to verify that your flood improvements that were required by the ordinance meet the ordinance. So they would hypothetically, we've talked about solar panels before. On solar, you're required to keep the electrical boxes 1 foot above the base flood elevation. So after you would have an engineer or somebody tell you, all right, this is gonna be it. After you build it, they will come and double check it to make sure that was it, that you are above your base flood elevation. Did that answer that question for you?
More or less.
Okay, what other questions did you have?
Well, this just seems like an awful lot for a dry run. There is maybe 5 weeks of trickle water through there in the spring.
So in your initial presentation, you said that it's never flooded up that high. So the floodplain map is not designed to tell you where it's going to be wet and where it's going to be dry. That map was designed to tell us the flood insurance rate map. It's designed to give us a zone. So 2 things. 1, they're identifying areas that could potentially flood. 2, they are identifying, if you want insurance, what your rate is going to be, whether you're inside that area or not. The areas can change so much depending on where the rain falls. If you have heavier rain to this side of your drainage, to that side of your drainage, it's going to make a difference on how high the water get. I've had people in Freeport tell me that the map is way too small. It should be a lot bigger. I've had people like yourself have told me it's never been wet there. There is a recourse. So once you say, I tell you you're in the floodplain, you apply for a permit. DNR says the flood height, the base flood elevation is 849 feet, hypothetically. You hire a surveyor, they measure the spot you want to be. And that spot is 852 feet elevation. Obviously, you are not in the floodplain. Then we would do a letter of map amendment or a letter map change. Forgive me, I don't really know which one it is yet, but it's a letter of map something. We're changing it. The official map will still show you in the floodplain, but you will have a certificate that says, hey, that ain't right. I'm not in the floodplain. All right. Any other questions that you had?
No, not right offhand.
All right, thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments?
These folks required to get insurance?
No, nobody is required to get insurance unless they want something else, such as if you have a mortgage on your property that is federally backed, the land or the structures in that floodplain will be required to have insurance. Your bank and your insurance company will be the ones to talk to on that.
Where would you find those base elevations that the DNR would say could override the firm?
Those base flood elevations do not exist until you apply for a floodplain permit, and the DNR will then do an individual study of your area and come up with that base flood information or base flood elevation.
And correct is that if we don't pass this ordinance, nobody can get flood insurance.
That is my understanding, that the county has to be enrolled in the NFIP, which is the National Flood Insurance Program, to be eligible to have the subsidized flood insurance in the area.
And would any FEMA money resulting from a flood be impacted by us being in or out of this?
Correct. Both the state and the federal government have laws on the books that say if the county does not adopt the National Flood Insurance Program, they will be ineligible for certain emergency funds.
And what the county is passing only affects properties outside city limits, right?
That is correct.
Each city has to adopt their own program if they wish to participate.
Yes, sir.
Are all of the cities opting in, do you know at the moment? Or-
I do not know if all of them are doing something right now, but I know that some of them are in the process of doing
Yeah.
things right now.
I know specifically that Spillville and Fort are both in that process.
I think to miss out on
Oh,
FEMA,
and Calmer, they have one section of Calmer that by NICC that falls into the flood.
not having access to FEMA money would be important. This is part of the decision.
So current structures that fall within the floodplain, ag or home wise, how are they affected? Will we have to have permits for them?
So there's two different categories. There's new construction and then there is previous, or I don't remember the exact title, but old construction. Okay, so anything you do, you'll be required to have a permit for it. But as far as following the regulation, there is a financial threshold that must be met. And it's, they call it substantial improvement. It's 50% of the value before the flooding, the map came into effect. Okay. So if you, and it is cumulative on things, it is to find out, if you have to do a repair that comes to more than 50%, the hull structure will need to meet the ordinance to flood. Floodproofing,
Yeah.
new ordinance, sorry.
That's what they do.
If your repair is less than 50%, then the entire structure, I shouldn't say repair, your repair or expansion is less than 50%. The repair and expansion need to meet the floodproofing, but your original portion of the structure does not need to. The 50% is cumulative. If you do a 25 and a 25, you're now at 50, the whole thing has to meet the floodproofing requirement.
Is there a cost to the county to opt into this program?
There, not that I know, not a direct cost that I know of. They, as in FEMA and the DNR that I have dealt with, are very anxious to get the county to join.
Maybe you don't know about this question, but is there any track record of reduction in asset value of a property if it falls within the program?
I do not know that answer.
Is there anybody online with any questions, comments? Anyone else in the room? It's at the table.
I think we need to do this if we want to get any FEMA assistance in future flooding, and we will have floods again.
And this actually will reduce the flood insurance for the people within the districts, will it not?
So I would assume if anybody has flood insurance in the unincorporated portions of the county, it is some type of private insurance. Once we are in the flood insurance program, we will have the subsidized insurance available. So I would assume your rates would go way down.
Anyone else has any other comments?
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion and a second to close public hearing. Is there any further discussion? If none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Well, now, since it's an ordinance, you would typically set the first reading right now and read it, and then decide if you want to do other readings or things after that.
Tony's got a good voice.
Period.
Where'd he go?
He's hiding back there.
You keep up, I'll start reading it.
What's that?
Okay,
I said, if you can keep up, I'll start reading it.
Only you need a motion to make the reading.
Motion for the first reading.
I'll second that.
We have a motion for the first reading.
Yes, we have.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimous.
All those in favor of Tony Phillips reading.
Well, this will be a tag team event, because when I start slurring my speech too much, somebody's gonna have to take over.
I just want to make it clear too, that this is a public document. So if anybody wanted a draft of this ordinance, we have this copy and we can make copies if you request them. It's just a lot of pages to make one for everybody in the room today.
The regulation portion is on the county website. The portion that's not on the website is going to be the very first and very last parts, is all the whereas and things like that.
It's at the bottom of the web page where it says in the spotlight, and it's one of those connections. You can read it online.
Ready?
Go ahead.
Ordinance amending the Winneshiek County zoning ordinance by the addition of the floodplain management, chapter 10. Whereas the Winneshiek County Board of Supervisors have adopted a resolution of intent to join the National Flood Insurance Program to reduce damages to property and to be eligible to receive any state or federal relief available from damages associated with flooding. And whereas the Planning and Zoning Commission has held a public hearing on the proposed amendment. Whereas a notice of the time and place of the public hearing on said request was published pursuant to law, and whereas the Winneshiek County Board of Supervisors have considered the Winneshiek County Comprehensive Plan in their review of the proposed amendment and find that the request is consistent with the policies and goals set out in the Winneshiek County Comprehensive Plan. And whereas a public hearing as required has been conducted by the Winneshiek County Board of Supervisors. Now, therefore, be it ordained by the Winneshiek County Board of Supervisors that the following floodplain management chapter 10 is now added to the Winneshiek County zoning ordinance 5. Definitions. Unless specifically defined below, words or phrases used in this ordinance shall be interpreted as to give them the meaning as they have in common usage and to give this ordinance its most reasonable application. A pertinent structure, a structure which is on the same parcel of a property as the principal structure to be insured and the use of which is incidental to the use of the principal structure. Base flood, the flood having a 1% chance of being equaled or exceeded in any given year, also commonly referred to as a 100-year flood. Base flood elevation, the elevation flood waters would reach at a particular site during the occurrence of a flood event. Basement, any enclosed area of a building which has its floor or lowest level below ground level, subgrade on all sides. Also see lowest floor. Development, any man-made change to improved or unimproved real estate, including but not limited to buildings or other structures, mining, dredging, filling, grading, paving, excavation, drilling operations, or storage of equipment or materials. Development does not include minor projects or routine maintenance of existing buildings and facilities as defined in this section. It also does not include gardening, plowing, or similar practices that do not involve filling or grading. Enclosed area below lowest floor. The floor of the lowest enclosed area in a building when all the following criteria are met. The enclosed area is designed to flood to equalize hydrostatic pressure during flood events with the walls or openings that satisfy the provisions of section 1000, paragraph 2, subparagraph D1 of this ordinance, and the enclosed area of the unfinished, not carpeted, drywalled, etc., and used solely for low damage potential uses such as building access, parking or storage, and machinery and service facilities, hot water heater, furnace, electrical service, contained in the enclosed area are located at least 1 foot above the base flood elevation, and the enclosed area is not a basement as defined in this section. Existing construction, any structure for which the start of construction commenced before the effective date of the first floodplain management regulations adopted by the community. Existing factory-built home park or subdivision. A factory-built home park or subdivision for which the construction of facilities for servicing the lots on which the factory-built homes are to be affixed including at a minimum, the installation of utilities, the construction of streets, and either final site grading or pouring of concrete pads, is completed before the effective date of the first floodplain management regulations adopted by the community. Expansion of existing factory-built home park or subdivision. The preparation of additional sites by the construction of facilities for servicing the lots on which the factory-built homes are to be affixed, including at a minimum, the installation of utilities, the construction of streets, and either the final site grading or the pouring of concrete pads. Factory-built home. Any structure designed for residential use, which is wholly or substantially part made, fabricated, formed, or assembled in a manufacturing facility for installation or assembly and installation on a building site. For the purpose of this ordinance, factory-built homes include mobile homes, manufactured homes, modular homes, and also include recreational vehicles which are placed on site for greater than 180 consecutive days and not fully licensed for and ready for highway use. Factory-built home, park, or subdivision. A parcel or contiguous parcels of land divided into 2 or more factory-built home lots for sale or lease. 500-year flood. A flood, the magnitude of which has 0.2% chance of being equaled or exceeded in any given year, or which on average will be equaled or exceeded at least once every 500 years. Flood, a general and temporary condition of partial or complete inundation of normally dry land areas resulting from the overflow of streams or rivers or from the unusual and rapid runoff of surface waters from any source. Flood insurance rate map. The official map prepared as part of, but published separately from, the flood insurance study, which delineates both the flood hazard areas and the risk premium zones applicable to the community. Flood insurance study. A report published by FEMA for a community issued along with the community's flood insurance rate maps. The study contains such background data as the base flood discharge and water surface elevations that were used to prepare the firm. Floodplain. Any land area susceptible to being inundated by water as a result of a flood. Floodplain management, an overall program of corrective and preventative measures for reducing flood damages and promoting the wise use of floodplains, including but not limited to emergency preparedness plans, flood control works, flood proofing, and floodplain management regulations. Flood proofing, a combination of structural and non-structural additions, changes, or adjustments to structures, including utility and sanitary facilities, which will reduce or eliminate flood damage to such structures. Floodway, the channel of a river or stream and those portions of the floodplains adjoining the channel which are reasonably required to carry and discharge floodwaters or flood flows so that confinement of flood flows to the floodway area will not cumulatively increase water surface elevation of the base flood by more than 1 foot. Floodway fringe, those portions of the special flood hazard area outside of the floodway. Highest adjacent grade, the highest natural elevation of the ground surface prior to construction next to the proposed walls of a structure. Historic structure, any structure that is A, listed individually in the National Register of Historic Places maintained by the Department of Interior or preliminarily determined by the Secretary of the Interior as meeting the requirements for individual listing of the National Register. B, certified or preliminarily determined by the Secretary of the Interior as contributing to the historical significance of a registered historic district or a district preliminarily determined by the Secretary to qualify as a registered historic district. C, individually listed on a state inventory of historic places in states with historic preservation programs which have been approved by the Secretary of the Interior, or D, individually listed on a local inventory of historic places in communities with historic preservation programs that have been certified by either an approved state program as determined by the Secretary of the Interior or directly by the Secretary of the Interior in states without approved programs. Lowest floor, the floor of the lowest enclosed area in a building, including a basement, except when the criteria listed in the definition of enclosed area below the lowest floor are met. Maximum damage potential development. Hospitals and like institutions, buildings or building complexes containing documents, data, or instruments of great public value. Buildings or building complexes containing materials dangerous to the public or fuel storage facilities. Power installations needed in emergency or other buildings or building complexes similar to in natural use. Minor projects, small development activities, except for filling, grading, and excavating, valued at less than $500. New construction, new buildings, factory-built home parks, those structures or development for which the start of construction commenced on or after the effective date of the first floodplain management regulations adopted by the community. New factory-built home park or subdivision, a factory-built home park or subdivision for which the construction of facilities for servicing the lots on which the factory-built homes are to be affixed, including at a minimum, the installation of utilities, the construction of streets, and either the final site grading or pouring of concrete pads is completed on or after the effective date of the first floodplain management regulations adopted by the community. Slurring is starting, people.
Well, you're doing fine.
Recreational vehicle, a vehicle which is A, built on a single chassis, B, 400 square feet or less with measurements at the largest horizontal projection, C, designed to be self-propelled or permanently towable by a light-duty truck, and D, designed primarily not for use as a permanent dwelling, but as a temporary living quarters for recreational camping, travel, or seasonal use. Routine maintenance of existing buildings and facilities. Repairs necessary to keep a structure in safe and habitable condition that do not trigger a building permit, provided they are not associated with general improvement of the structure or repair of damaged structures. Such repairs include normal maintenance of structures such as re-roofing, replacing roof tiles, and replacing siding. B, exterior or interior painting, papering, tiling, carpeting, cabinets, countertop, and similar finish work. C, basement ceiling. D, repairing or replacing damaged or broken windows. E, repairing plumbing systems, electrical systems, heating or air conditioning systems, and repairing of wells or septic systems. Special flood hazard area. The land within a community subject to the base flood. This land is identified on the community's flood insurance rate map as zones A, A1-30, AE, AH, AO, AR, and or A99. Start of construction includes substantial improvement and means the date of the development the development permit was issued, provided the actual start of construction, repair, reconstruction, rehabilitation, addition, placement, or other improvement was within 180 days of permit date. The actual start means either the first placement or permanent construction of structure on site, such as pouring of a slab or footings, the installation of a pile, the construction of columns, or any work beyond the stage of excavation, or placement of a factory-built home on a foundation. Permanent construction does not include land preparation, such as clearing, grading, and filling, nor does it include the installation of streets or walkways, nor does it include excavation for a basement, footing, piers, or foundations, or the erection of temporary forms, nor does it include the installation of on the property of an accessory building such as a garage or shed not occupied as a dwelling unit or not part of the main structure. For substantial improvement, the actual start of construction means the first alteration of any wall, ceiling, floor, or other structural part of the building, whether or not that alteration affects the external dimensions of the building. Structure, anything constructed or erected on the ground or attached to the ground, including but not limited to buildings, factories, shed, cabins, factory-built homes, storage tanks, drain storage facilities, and or other similar uses. Substantial damage, damage of any origin sustained by a structure whereby the cost of restoring the structure to its before damage condition would equal or exceed 50% of the market value of the structure before the damage occurred. Volunteer labor and donated materials shall be included in the estimate cost of repair. Substantial damage also means flood-related damages flood-related damages sustained by a structure on 2 separate occasions during a 10-year period for which the cost of repairs at the time of flood event on average equals or exceeds 25% of the market value of the structure before the damage occurred. Volunteer labor and donated materials shall be included in the estimated cost repair. Substantial improvement. Any improvement to a structure which satisfies either of the following criteria. A, any repair, reconstruction, or improvement of a structure taking place during a 10-year period, the cumulative cost of which equals or exceeds 50% of the market value of the structure, either before the start of construction of the first improvement of the structure, or if the structure has been substantially damaged and is being restored before the damage occurred. The term does not, however, include any project, thank you, it does not include any project for improvement of a structure to correct existing violations of state or local health, sanitary, or safety code specifications, which have been identified by the local code enforcement official and which are the minimum necessary to assure safe living conditions. The term also does not include any alteration of a historic structure, provided the alteration will not preclude the structure's designation as a historic structure. B, any addition which increases the original floor area of a building by 25% or more. All additions constructed after the effective date of the first floodplain management regulations adopted by the community shall be added to any proposed addition in determining whether the total increased original floor space would exceed 25%. Variance, a grant of relief by a community from the terms of the floodplain management regulations. Violation, the failure of a structure or other development to be fully compliant with the community's floodplain management regulations. That was the definitions. 1002, statutory authority, findings of fact and purpose. The legislature of the state of Iowa has in chapter 335 of the Iowa Code, as amended, delegated the power to counties to enact zoning regulations to secure safety from flood and to promote health and general welfare. Findings of fact. The flood hazard areas of Winneshiek County are subject to periodic inundation, which can result in the loss of life and property, health and safety hazards, disruptions of commerce and government services, extraordinary public expenditures for flood protection and relief, and impairment of the tax base, of all of which adversely affect public health, safety, and general welfare of the community. These flood losses, hazards, and related adverse effects are caused by the occupancy of flood hazard areas by uses vulnerable to flood damages, which create hazard conditions as a result of being inadequately elevated or otherwise protected from flooding, and the cumulative effect of obstructions on the floodplain causing increase in flood heights and velocities. C, this ordinance relies upon engineering methodology for analyzing flood hazards, which is consistent with the standards established by the Department of Natural Resources. Statement of purpose. It is the purpose of this ordinance to protect and preserve the rights, privileges, and property of Winneshiek County and its residents, and to preserve and improve the peace, safety, health, welfare, and comfort and convenience of its residents by minimizing those flood losses described in 1002-2A of this ordinance, with provisions designed to A, reserve sufficient floodplain area for the conveyance of flood flows so that flood heights and velocities will not be increased substantially. B, restrict or prohibit uses which are dangerous to health, safety, or property in times of flood, or which cause excessive increase in flood heights or velocities. C, require the uses vulnerable to floods, including public facilities which serve such uses, be protected against flood damage at the time of the initial construction or substantial improvement. D, protect individuals from buying lands which may not be suited for intended purposes because of the flood hazard. And E, assure that eligibility is maintained for property owners in the community to purchase flood insurance through the National Flood Insurance Program.
Do you want to could we have a motion to pause the reading and resume it after Andy's time so you can do your other business and then come back.
Can we
'Cause I don't
do
think this
that
is good.
without the passage of this?
Well, I think the reading is still,
Reading?
yeah, I think the reading is still being taken place, so you'll have to resume it. Pause the reading and resume at 11 o'clock or something like that. So that you can do these other items.
Then we can,
I know when the zoning ordinance was passed, they had to pause it and resume like on multiple days, because it was binder like this thing, so.
We're 1/3 of the way through.
Yeah.
The reading.
I think I'm pretty busy later.
Just a suggestion.
you know, I wouldn't blame you. Tony. Someone wanna make a motion then to?
Move that we pause the reading.
Is there a second?
Resume later. Second.
At approximately 11:10 when Andy's finished.
Have a motion and a second to pause with the reading and resume around 11 o'clock. All those in favor, say aye.
Right.
If anyone wants to leave and would like a copy, I can give you my copy and get another one. We're on page 7 of 19.
What we'll do is we'll just skip over the miscellaneous real quick here, and we'll move on to the 10:30 agenda item. Jim Ludeking, Springfield Township Clerk. Township officials pay. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning. Morning, Sheriff. You want me to sit here?
You can sit
Have a
there.
chair.
Bruce Searslin was talking to me just before I seen you come up on the agenda, so whatever it is.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that was a short conversation, wasn't it?
How many years has it been?
This is my 25th year being the clerk of Springfield Township. My name's Jim Ludeking. I farm south of Decorah out here in Ordinance. I am the self-appointed sheriff in Ordinance. Anyway, I've been a trustee or clerk for 25 years. I got the job. Originally, my name was written in at the November meeting, November vote. And three others each got a vote. So the supervisors put the names in a hat, and my name was drawn out. And Georgianne Swarningfoots called me and asked me if I would willing to be the clerk. So that's how I got the job. I wasn't smart enough to say no. I've never filed papers to rerun for the job. I've always gotten written in. A couple times I got beat. Those people didn't want the job, so Georgianne come back to me. Anyway, I'm here on behalf of the trustees and clerks of Winneshiek County Townships. Just bring to your attention that in 1999 I started. We were getting $20 a meeting. In May of 24, we were still getting $20. December of 2005, we started getting $25 now a meeting. That went for 7 years to 2011. 2012, it went to $45. So it's been 12 years since we've had any raise or been visited this. So I'd appreciate it if you guys take it up and consider.
Suggestions?
Well, when you went from 20 to $25, that's a 25% increase. From 25 to 45 is almost a 50% increase.
No, that was 100%.
Well, that'd be 20. Excuse me, that'd be about 90%.
50 would be 100.
So we're at 45 a meeting. And I can live with that, but it's
If you want to
hard
get anybody to be on it,
it's almost impossible.
Oh, yeah.
How many times do you meet?
Pardon?
How often do you meet?
The trustees meet in January, usually to elect officers, and then they'll go into setting up a public meeting for setting the levy for fire protection. And so then that's got to be 10 to 14 days after you post it at the county courthouse, Ben's office. You have that meeting. So there could be 2 to 3 meetings per township. But if there's a fence dispute, they deal with fence disputes. So there you have, each time they get together for something like that. If they have an emergency come up with fire protection and they have to deal with a replacement of fire truck or something like that, you'd have a meeting, but anywhere from 2 to 4 meetings.
Typically, you're gonna have 3 required meetings a year. You're gonna have 1 to set the budget hearing, 1 to hold the budget hearing, and 1 in August or September to certify the annual report. Those are 3 required by the code.
And how many trustees are there per township?
3 trustees and 1 clerk.
So
4 of us, yeah. Per township.
Just so you know, for the first run of the budget, knowing this was on the agenda, I increased it 33%.
$60.
$60, just for something to put in on the first run. So we budget typically to pay all of the trustees and clerks for all the meetings. We've been budgeting about 15,000, or we've been budgeting 15,000 a year. We haven't used it all up very frequently, so I went to 20 in the first run.
Thank you.
Don't want to lose.
No.
No, I see no problem.
Well, at 72, you're probably gonna lose me pretty soon. And I'm one of the younger pups.
Well, we'll take it to the end then.
Bitter end.
I refuse to file papers to run for the job. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
serving us.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, yes. for-
How much is this Washington City Council get paid per?
No. I just last day was 40.
Gee, you guys are well paid. We get 20 in this building.
Yeah, but ours usually take 2 hours.
Ours do too.
That's something I think we need to look at.
Yeah,
It sounds
It's
very
hard.
different.
it's really hard to find a lot of volunteers for this. Just kind of covers some expenses of gas or whichever, and a little honorarium because they do fence. How often do we have fence line disputes?
Was that last year or 2 years ago?
2
Last
years
year,
ago.
or 2 years ago, it will be this summer. Doesn't happen much anymore.
All right, next on the
Not
agenda,
many fences.
10 to 40, Stephanie Fromm, Mark Jensen, Winneshiek County Development and Tourism. You can see you guys hiding back there.
Stuck in.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hello, everybody.
You get a regular tall chair.
Yeah, I feel like all of a sudden I'm sitting up. Yeah. Well, we are up here today. Ben had reached out to us last week, I believe, beginning of the week, to ask for us to come up and provide some clarification on some questions that you guys had regarding our organization.
Just one question.
Yes.
We came up with what Decorah spent toward your program last year, and it said that Decorah upfront did not donate any money to it, but they backfed it to the hotel motel tax. That
I would say that in general is a rough way in which it could be described.
Okay.
They're
We're included in the budget.
Yeah, we're included in their budget this year. So last year at that midnight hour of, the tax change, what they elected to do is their direct membership check written from the city of Decorah was then exchanged and went through the hotel motel committee. That previously had not been done that way. In the way in which it's written, that entity wasn't able to pay for direct services, but there was an amendment made to the bylaws within the hotel motel committee that enabled them to have us disperse in that fashion. Now, then they were able to rework that budget. At that same time, they also cut their contribution to many other nonprofit organizations. So it wasn't just us that they excluded out of that. So out of that coffer, that is the hotel motel committee that gets dispersed amongst various places throughout the structure, the Parks and Recreation, the Hotel Motel Committee, the business park, we were able to recapture that to support our organization that year. But now this year we put in a budget request and have been built back into the budget as Decor's direct. Because we explained to them that by us having to deploy that money through the hotel motel, then that's just that much less money that can be used to exercise all the efforts within the tourism profile that now is spent on the organization versus the efforts that that committee does. Yeah. And that,
Do you want to comment on the dollar amount?
Yes.
Because that was the question too.
so they are passed through their contribution, I think is $2 per.
$250 per capita, so it's about just over 19,000 that the city provides, but then we also have a contract with Decora Jobs that the city funds their own economic development organization, and we provide. I wear two hats, so I wear the county hat and I wear the Decora Jobs hat. So they contract for our time, which is an additional $38,500. So it's about, whatever the math is.
19 and 35, yeah, so you're looking at, $57,000 that they pass through. And an example of that with that economic development, that's a good parlay into that, so like that work that we're conducting on behalf of that economic development arm, for example, up in the business park. Right now, we're hoping to be near the wet ink portion of a 5-year negotiation with a large business to develop a site up in that area that would have a guaranteed assessment of, I think, 3.8 million. In that, when that would happen, the county would benefit to the tune of $18,500 of that, even though it's in the city limits, technically the city's business park. We are executing to the bottom line of the county as well through the tax levies that would be in place that would be earned then by the county. So annually, 18.5 annually, that would come out of that new tax roll. So even when that's in the end, Decor is in the county. We represent all the county. I know we talked, from our angle last year, but that's a great example of that. We get that mutual, rising tides float all boat concept. When we're developing within even the city limits, we're driving the return on investment that you guys put into this organization.
And it just goes to further show economic development is a marathon, and so is tourism. I mean, we are one of the only counties that have really bounced back in Northeast Iowa, specifically from COVID, from prior to COVID. We've now surpassed what we were rolling at in terms of visitor tourism spending. And I would say, a lot of it has to do with our relationship at the state level and the Soul of Iowa campaign that was run a couple of years ago, but then also our capacity to leverage funding and human power. I mean, it's us, it's Maddie, it's the chamber, our relationship with the chamber, it's the Visit Decor, it's the other communities all sort of paddling in this same direction for tourism, promoting each other in a similar brand and a similar voice.
So it was on the radio last week. Is it Maddie that's been working with the video of the outlying cities for tour? Is it for tourism or what?
Yes, yeah, that was a tourism grant. So again, like our budget has a line item in it that has special project funding, and it's not a lot of funding, but that's the money that we use to leverage to grants so that we went out to these other communities, secured small sort of contributions from their economic development in cities. I think it's between 100, I think Steve helped with the one in Spillville, but $100 to $200 a piece. But then we make up the match difference, and it was about $2,500 that we put up to say, we'll give $2,500. The state came in with just under 10,000 to put together 3 or 4 promotional videos that would be released online and specifically highlighting Kelmer, Ocean. It'll be a little bit of Fort and then Spillville too. And they will all have their own little theme. And then we will share it, through social media, Visit Decora social media channels, YouTube, and then those communities specifically will be able to put them on their website, their city websites. So just to try to drive home the views. And then the state of Iowa, their tourism office is always looking for more video content. Not a lot of communities have it. That professional video content will be used at the state level then too.
Nice. Actually, the state tourism office, we work with them through NEDA, the Northeast Iowa Tourist Association, which we help and are part of. as well. And they provided us with some state data that we were working on some other day, you know, and for example, you know, right now in 2022 year ending, Winneshiek County was a beneficiary of total tourism dollars, direct and indirect, of $63.7 million. If that line item was to be replaced within your guys' income stream of real estate taxes, that would take the average levy from 195 to 325 per thousand for the citizens of this county. And so that drive, and when we're continuing to build, you know, 58 million in 19, 42 million in 20, back up to 59 million in 21, 63 million in 2022, just those 5 million, 6 million, just $5 million, $6 million increase, that's an 8.5% return or increase from 21 to 22. When you multiply that back into the budget, we look at what that revenue stream that draws. We're blessed to have that type of draw, that type of participation. And, you know, coming as a volunteer board member of this only happens because we have qualified professionals in these seats. And we are 100% reliant upon you, the city of Decorah, our members, all of them to do that. And the main asset that we have as an organization is our people and our qualified people. The same way that the county does with it, you know, whether it's your IT person, you just got to have someone that knows how to do the job in the seat. And so our largest expenditures that we're so blessed with is that our staff are so capable that we're not having to third party all this stuff out. When I talked to one of the state tourism people, they were amazed that our budget was as small as it was with the production that we have. And so much of that is that we're able to self-perform, whereas many counties are having to go hire a marketing firm somewhere, third party, where they are getting paid, you know, at their rates instead of us being able to self-execute. So we're pretty blessed to be at the part with the performance that we have and the return on investment we're able to create to keep our budget where it's at has been it's been a surmountable task, and is largely due to herself and the other people that are, you know, moving that effort forward.
Can you speak to the hotel motel tax and how that benefits the entire county?
Yeah, I mean, just point like bare bones. The fact that we have hotels in the community helps drive our tourism. And it enables people to have overnight stays, which is proven time and time again that deepens the total spending outside of just the hotel. Now you have multiple meals out instead of a single meal. Now you have more likely to have traveled farther, to have stayed overnight, which then those people buy fuel and those things. So just having that now, the capture of that within that thing also allows us to then support the, you know, marketing efforts. So like the bulk of all marketing dollars spent for the county are actually happening within the $125,000 pot.
Yeah. So
hotel motel gets.
So hotel motel, it's a tax collected by the city from overnight stays. So all Airbnbs, motels, and hotels collect this tax from the visitor. So it's literally just a pass through for the city. So the city spends, a long time ago, they established, I don't even know, in the 90s, maybe in the early 90s, I think is when it was established. They share that pot of money with Decorah Park and Rec. So it maintains the trail within the city limits. A large portion of that will go to redo the trail on some of the spots that it's broken and maintain some of the parks. And then it gets split to Decorah Jobs. So Decorah Jobs is a recipient of those funds. They maintain and own the Decorah Business Park. They have a contract with Winneshiek County Development to provide the service, the person that helps sell the land, and then court businesses that are looking to expand. And then the third pot that it's distributed to is the Hotel Motel Marketing Committee. And that's where all of the tourism ads that you see placed in all of the magazines and stuff we passed around last time we were here. So those direct marketing efforts, website development, professional photography, videography, and I think that is just over $100,000 that goes towards specifically those marketing efforts. None of that money in which can be directly given to us. I mean, we can't just say, oh, we're doing marketing efforts, you should give us money. That's not how the 2080 agreement, that's not how it was passed. That wasn't allowed. That one-time allocation was from basically the savings account. I mean, they depleted their savings accounts to be able to backfill the city. So it just wasn't, it was seen as like not.
Well, and actually the city has no direction of that money. It is another board of which I'm so graced to be the president of that board as well.
Those are public meetings, so.
That is a public meeting, so it's a public meeting, but it is appointed, and so there are people throughout the county and throughout, it's a structured committee where it's like Winneshiek County Development President, Chamber of the Decorah, or, Chamber of the city's chamber president, or whatever you want to say. There's a city councilman, there's a representative from hotel motel, or from hotels, lodging, representative from restaurant and retail, representative from something that builds that committee. And we actually dictate how the money is spent. And so as a group, last year, we were like, we're not gonna starve the two things that are actually doing all of the work. So we, as that committee, elected to essentially pay them to hire that. The city, we went about it that way. They changed a rule that enabled us to do that. Because in the past, it used to be where you had to hire a third party. And so then most of the money got gobbled up because you were hiring some marketing firm out of Cedar Rapids to do localized work, and they aren't that bought in. So some of that has really improved, where we've been able to put in-house talent that has been able to just leverage those dollars even further.
And that's how Maddie comes into play too. I mean, I think the number one request since I've been here for almost 9 years now was to have more representation in these outlying communities. And I'm only one person, and I also have a family, so I'm not gonna be working 90-hour weeks, right? But I can't be present at every single meeting, which is why Maddie has been such a blessing to our entire office. I mean, she's been able to go out and knock on doors and shake hands with people, meet businesses that then I can help almost cross-train what I've learned in the last 9 years and give her some of this knowledge too, so that if something ever happens to me, I mean, then you have a second person in the office that knows what's going on. So.
Yeah, Maddie is an absolute positive thing for tourism in the perception of the rural areas. Because rural areas see hotel motel tax and tourism is benefiting Decorah specifically. And what kind of an outreach are you able to do to change the perception in the rural areas that what we're dealing with is a request of, or is it 100,000, is in the rural sense is going to help that 60% of the county that sits outside looking in, and all they see is, with the exception of the breweries, Calmer's, Pivo looks at it differently. They sense some benefit from some bike riders that show up.
$2 1,000 per population, they're given 15, and if we were in comparison, we'd be at 25,000 for what the city gives.
So that perception is something that is real world outside of this environment right here.
Well,
so how do you mitigate that?
I've been the president or involved with Winneshiek County for over 10 years. And it is something that has been fought or struggled with regularly. And I think the only way you can say it is look at those numbers. Those dollars are being spent in this community. They're never going to be appropriate, be able to be placed, dollar for dollar on an appropriation basis equally throughout. Each community brings a unique asset to the county as a whole. And I would also call upon you guys. You guys are leaders within this community. Help us communicate that message to the rural departments. Help us reach out. I'm a Blufftonite. I live there. I use the county roads every day. And I'm here to, express the virtues of this organization. And you guys are here too, as members of your constituency. And I ask you to help press that back. If you're hearing these concerns, let us know if there's any data points we can get you. Let us know how we can do that, because it's always been a divide and it's always been a challenge. And I don't know that we'll ever convince some minds, and oftentimes those minds are the loudest. But it doesn't mean that we aren't doing the work.
Yeah, see, Maddie, her presence, for example, of visiting the city councils, because I attend 4 of them in my district. And, I've gone to brag on Maddie, and I have introduced Maggie at those meetings and so forth that I attend each month. And and Maddie, with this video aspect of what you're doing and helping with giving some hope for them, because like your organization, it's basically volunteer, and all of those small cities are in the same, they're all volunteer leadership. And so they're in the same boat trying to keep their cities going, and they're looking for the same thing. And all they do is, the perception is real.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, and that's where it's tough, is like, if we're looking to make things depends what is considered fair versus a rising tides float all boat concept, you know, and us being present is one of the reasons that we've carved out in this budget to try to have that extra employee. And I think we're already seeing the return on investment that it's bringing. And I think that time of having her in that spot, and when she lands a 10,000 grant for a house tear down in Austin and a, you know, whatever tree grant that it is with a lion for the other communities and things like that, we're going to have to create and present that return on investment. And I know that we get positive feedback from Kelmer often and Austin. The more rural ones are harder, but it's harder to create opportunities in those spaces as well at times.
I know.
And, you know, I know that Maddie spent time with the director of the Bailey Clock recently and tried to develop a marketing plan with them and using that resource. And the other thing too, that sometimes makes it tough for us is we have to maintain a level of confidentiality. We can't tell you that we met with the business owner in Spillville on our own because they're expecting us to maintain that break in space. Same thing that goes with these large projects of 5 years. The reason that we are that arm is most people don't want to come to a county supervisors meeting and ask to buy land. Think that you guys probably have some familiarity with that. Same thing in the city, up in the business park. By providing that level of anonymity and that break in space that allows us to help negotiate before it comes onto the public record, there's so much work that no one knows even happens. We could spend 5 years on this deal and it could come that it doesn't pan out, but yet we spent 5 years of Stephanie's time. And so we have to bet on the come. You have to see the return on investment through the increasing tourism dollars. And hopefully we have an opportunity in this county for everyone to take their time in the sun. We had a project in Austin for about 4 years. We were trying to develop on the rail line and it didn't work out. But it doesn't mean there wasn't 4 years there that we were trying to get it to work, you know? And so that's those things that sometimes there's a lot of anonymous or under the table work that's happening that we don't even get to express that this is an achievement, whether or not it actually came to fruition.
I think the message through this is that perception isn't always reality. And that it's our job too, and thank you for reminding us of that, is to have our narrative correct and based on the facts that you're dealing with, so that we can control that narrative to be truth.
But I also think, I mean, it doesn't matter where the business or the opportunity is located, it's providing jobs for people that live
In the county.
across the entire county. If we didn't have the things being developed and going on, people would be driving to Rochester and La Crosse more than they are now.
Well, you should see our labor shed study. I mean, our labor shed study shows the density of people that are coming to our county to work greater than the ones that are leaving. And so if we have people coming into work, you know, there's ways that we can be, you know, be happy about that, even if it's coming across the Chickasaw County line or, you know, or whatever, Fayette into Winneshiek and so on and so forth. So, yeah, you know, I've been here, I don't know how many times. A lot.
Yeah.
And I can say I've never been more proud of the work that's getting done. And I can tell you with 100% certainty that $100,000 is getting the return on investment that you're not getting from lots of other places, unfortunately. And I believe with my whole heart that we're worthy of that cost or we wouldn't have asked for it. And I think doing this extra thing, that increase did not pay for all of us to have Maddie. This organization is covering a big portion of that to try to make that work. The first time we got it, we only got it because of a private donor helped create a second position the first time. And we realized how much an impact that had when Laura Freese worked for us for a while and what that enabled us to do in a different wavelength. And we prioritized that through other budget savings and doing things in-house. So I would ask that you fully fund it. And I think that I'm confident that we will continue to show you the numbers that support that level of a request.
All right, thank you.
Cheers.
One last thing is, see if you could find some way to create a grant writing opportunity for these outlying areas to better understand how the daunting area of grantees and how grant writing works as a way to do it in something in the outlying area to try to get them engaged. Because most of these people, they look at that, they hear the word, there's money out there, they don't know even how to get there. I know what Maddie has done with the Beely Clock manager has been very helpful. Before that, Laura Freest did all that she could do before she left, and that was very helpful. But I mean, that's an area.
I mean, that was one thing that Laura did teach me and others, and even in the office, is if you have a project, that's when you go after grants. You should never create a project to get a grant.
Right.
So if it starts with a project, if your community has a project, you should reach out to our office and we can help.
A great starting point too, and it's very different than the kind of grants that we're talking. Somebody, if you're a $5,000 grant versus $1 million grant, but the Northeast Iowa, or what is the casino money? No, the one that they give out where people apply.
Community Foundation.
Community Foundation. They just held an application seminar prior to for people that like is essentially a lot of overlap to that, but that would be something we could certainly partner with, or, the county to put that on to, make you aware where you'd even look for grants or what a grant is, how a grant works more so, but she's right, like it sinks in the most when you're actually doing it for an actual project, because then people actually comprehend why this is needed to do that versus speaking in the abstract, but we can absolutely look at that.
Yeah, it pays off. Like, for example, it just is they got, the Beely Clocks got a 28,000 grant for their air conditioning for the humidity control they needed. And that was the first time she'd even applied for a grant,
Oh, yeah.
which is huge.
And those kind of places can't live without that kind of assistance, yeah.
No.
Well, are there any other questions, or do you feel like we've covered what was Ben, what you remembered or had requested for? Yeah.
Covered there.
If you have people who have questions about what we're doing, that response you're getting, have them call me. Mark Jensen, Viking State Bank. I'll be happy to discuss.
Thank you.
You guys.
Cheers, friends. Have a great day. Thank you
Yeah,
for all
you
your
too.
support.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, Andy Van Maaten.
Good morning.
Good morning.
That's an energy level that's tough to follow.
Yes.
What do you have for me today?
So the two items I had listed on there are probably both ones you were gonna wait till next week to pursue further. The land sale, they're still in the process of doing the reading. It's gonna take more time than what they had earlier in the agenda. So they're gonna read that when you're done here.
Other ones.
Well, the land sale was dependent upon the adoption of the floodplain ordinance, so they haven't finished that reading process yet, so that is gonna have to wait till next week, and then the other one are these RFPs for HR services, so there were 4 of those, and they all got copies, but I think they need more time to review these probably before.
I definitely need more time to review them.
Yeah, been through.
We can talk next week. The other thing I'd like to talk to you about next week is I have 2 issues from the sheriff's office on cattle on county roadways again. One's a regular, the other's a new one. I just want your authorization next week to refer it to township trustees to get involved for the fencing.
They
I
did put
think
new
we should-
fencing on the one once, but that's,
If you don't keep
Yeah.
it closed, it doesn't work.
been pretty quiet in the neighborhood about it. I haven't heard a whole lot.
No, it's been, I think, the last month.
Oh, it has now again.
Yeah, so
Because I drove by
anyway,
it.
I need you to take action on it
Sure.
next week.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to pursue it, but it's,
One's the repeat offender. And
So action at next week's meeting.
I got notes for that, and these other 2 items to be on your agenda time next week.
okay, that's good. Anything else?
No.
What's a general billing rate in this town for legal services?
Around 250.
I'm gonna guess. I'm just reviewing the proposed numbers.
There is, I urge you to, look at the billing rates. There's some other factors that we can talk about next week, but you have 4 firms that are capable and well-respected. Yeah, I have a recommendation for you. I'll give it to you next week and talk about it.
Okay.
Because I think we have had a relationship with one of those firms off and on over the years, and given the discussion that I've had with Steve and Shirley about their vision for HR down the road, I think this is better suited for Harrison or 2 of the others, and it's not strictly
an hourly basis, so what are you talking about?
These, you sent us 3 to look at previously.
I sent you 3 and then I forwarded a 4th on Friday evening.
That will be number, we'll refer to as number 4.
Well, and they're, I mean, I think they're public records at this point. They've responded to the RFP, so I don't know what we need to say, number 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right.
Okay. So we can refer to them by
Their name.
name.
Great. And they are all out of town firms.
Yes.
Cedar Rapids and
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have any in-town labor law firms that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks.
We need a motion to resume the reading.
I think we can just pick it up because that was the previous motion was to resume it after Andy was done, so. Sorry, we didn't talk about it. Next week.
Okay.
This one's in
I think so, yeah, because your motion was to just resume when he was after Andy's time, so you resume the reading.
All right.
1,003.
You sure we went on page 20?
I think you had one paragraph left, didn't you?
Sorry.
I'm sorry I didn't leave more time. I didn't know how long it was. Plus, I didn't know how much discussion, and that's why I put the miscellaneous in there, figuring you could move that, but that still wasn't enough to talk about this.
1003, general provisions. Lands to which the ordinance applies. The provisions of this ordinance shall apply to all lands within the jurisdiction of Winneshiek County, shown on the official floodplain zoning map as being within the boundaries of the floodway fringe, and general floodplain overlay districts as established in section 1005 of this ordinance. Establishment of the official floodplain zoning map. The flood insurance rate map for Winneshiek County and incorporated areas dated February 22nd of 2024, which was prepared as part of the flood insurance study for Winneshiek County, are hereby adopted by reference and declared to be the official floodplain zoning map. The Winneshiek County Flood Insurance Study is hereby adopted by reference and is made a part of this ordinance for the purpose of administering the floodplain management regulations. Rules for interpretation of district boundaries. The boundaries of the zoning district areas shall be determined by scaling distances on the official floodplain zoning map. When an interpretation is needed as to the exact location of a boundary, the zoning administrator shall make the necessary interpretation. The Board of Adjustment shall hear and decide appeals when it is alleged that there is an error in any requirement, decision, or determination made by the zoning administrator in the enforcement or administration of this ordinance. Compliance. No structure or land shall hereafter be used, and no structure shall be located, extended, converted, or structurally altered without full compliance with the terms of this ordinance and other applicable regulations which apply to uses within the jurisdiction of the ordinance. Abrogation and greater restrictions. It is not intended by this ordinance to repeal, abrogate, or impair any existing easements, covenants, or deed restrictions. However, where this ordinance imposes greater restrictions, the provision of this ordinance shall prevail. All other ordinances inconsistent with this ordinance and are hereby repealed to the extent of the inconsistency only. Interpretation. In their interpretation and application, the provisions of this ordinance shall be held to the minimum requirements and shall be liberally construed in favor of the governing body, and shall not be deemed a limitation or repeal of any other powers granted by state statutes. Warning and disclaimer of liability. The standards required by this ordinance are considered reasonable for regulatory purposes. This ordinance does not imply that areas outside the designated floodplain or flood overlay district areas will be free from flooding or flood damages. This ordinance shall not create liability on the part of Winneshiek County or on any officer or employee thereof for any flood damages that result from reliance on this ordinance or any administrative decision lawfully made thereunder. Severability. If any section, clause, provision, or portion of this ordinance is adjudged unconstitutional or invalid by a court of competent jurisdiction, the remainder of this ordinance shall not be affected hereby or thereby. 1004, administration, appointment duties and responsibilities to local official. A, the zoning administrator is hereby appointed to implement and administer the provisions of this ordinance and will herein be referred to as the administrator. B, duties and responsibilities of the administrator shall include, but not necessarily be limited to, the following. 1, review of all floodplain development permit applications to assure the provisions of this ordinance will be satisfied. 2, review floodplain development applications to assure that all necessary permits have been obtained from federal, state, local government agencies, including approval when required from the Department of Natural Resources for floodplain construction. 3, record and maintain a record of the elevation in relation to the North American Vertical Datum 1988 of the lowest floor, including the basement, of all new or substantially improved structures, or the elevation to which new or substantially improved structures have been flood-proof. 4, notify adjacent communities or counties and the Department of Natural Resources prior to any proposed alteration or relocation of a watercourse, and submit evidence of such notifications to the Federal Emergency Management Agency. 5, keep a record of all permits, appeals, and such other transactions and correspondences pertaining to the administration of this ordinance. 6, submit to the Federal Insurance Administrator an annual report concerning the community's participation, utilizing the annual report form supplied by the Federal Insurance Administrator. 7, notify the Federal Insurance Administration of any annexations or modifications to the community's boundaries. 8, review subdivision proposals to ensure such proposals are consistent with the purpose of this ordinance and advise the Board of Adjustment of potential conflict. 9, maintain the accuracy of the community's flood insurance rate maps when A, development placed within the floodway overlay district results in any of the following. First, an increase in the base flood elevations or alteration to the floodway boundary. B, development placed in zones A, AE, AH, and A1-30 that does not include a designated floodway that will cause a rise of more than 1 foot in the base flood elevation, or development relocates or alters the channel. Within 6 months of the completion of the development, the applicant shall submit to FEMA all scientific and technical data necessary for a letter of map revision. 10, perform site inspections to ensure compliance with the standards of this ordinance. 11, forward all requests for variances to the Board of Adjustment for consideration. Ensure all requests include the information ordinarily submitted with the applications, as well as any additional information deemed necessary to the Board of Adjustment. Floodplain development permit. A permit required. A floodplain development permit issued by the administrator shall be secured prior to any floodplain development. Any man-made change to improved or unimproved real estate, including but not limited to buildings or other structures, mining, filling, grading, paving, storage of materials and equipment, excavation or drilling operations, including the placement of factory-built homes. B, application for permit. Application shall be made on forms furnished by the administrator and shall include the following. 1, description of work to be covered by the permit for which the application is to be made. 2, description of the land on which the proposed work is to be done. For example, lot, block, tract, street address, or similar description that will readily identify and locate the work to be done. 3, location and dimensions of all structures and additions. 4, indication of the use of the occupancy for which the proposed work is intended. 5, elevation of the base flood. 6, elevation in relation to the North American Vertical Datum 1988 of the lowest floor, including basement of the structures, or of the level to which the structure is to be flood-proof. 7, for structures being improved or rebuilt, the estimated cost of improvements and market value of the structure prior to the improvements. 8, such other information as the administrator deems reasonably necessary for example, drawings or site plan, for the purpose of this ordinance. C, action on permit application. The administrator shall, within a reasonable time, make a determination as to whether the proposed floodplain development meets the applicable standards of this ordinance and shall approve or disapprove the application. For disapprovals, the applicant shall be informed in writing of the specific reasons therefor. The administrator shall not issue permits for variances except as directed by the Board of Adjustment. D, construction and use to be provided in application and plans. Floodplain development permits based on the basis of approved plans and applications authorize only the use, arrangement, and construction set forth in such approved plans and applications, and no other use, arrangement, or construction. Any use, arrangement, or construction at variance with the authorized, with that authorized, shall be deemed a violation of this ordinance. The applicant shall be required to submit certification by a professional engineer or land surveyor as appropriate, registered in the state of Iowa, that the furnished fill, structure floor elevations, flood proofing, and other flood protection measures were accomplished in compliance with the provisions of this ordinance prior to the use or occupancy of any structure. (1005) Establishment of zoning overlay districts. The floodplain areas within the jurisdiction of this ordinance are hereby divided into the following districts. A, floodway district. Those areas identified as floodway on the official floodplain zoning map. B, floodway fringe overlay district. Those areas identified as zone AE on the official floodplain zoning map, but excluding those areas identified as floodway. And C, general floodplain overlay district. Those areas identified as zone A on the official floodplain zoning map. The boundary shall be as shown on the official floodplain zoning map. Within these districts, all uses not allowed as permitted uses are prohibited unless a variance to the terms of this ordinance is granted after due consideration by the Board of Adjustment. 1006, floodway overlay district. The permitted uses. All development within the floodway district shall be permitted to the extent that they are not prohibited by any other ordinance or underlying zoning district, and provided they meet applicable performance standards of the floodway district. Performance standards. All floodway district uses allowed as a permitted use shall meet the following standards. A, no development shall be permitted in the floodway district that would result in any increase in the base flood elevation. Consideration of the effects of any development on the flood levels shall be based upon the assumption that an equal degree of development would be allowed for similarly situated lands. B, all development within the floodway district shall, 1, be consistent with the need to minimize flood damage. 2, use construction methods and practices that will minimize flood damage. And 3, use construction materials and utility equipment that are resistant to flood damage. C, no development shall affect the capacity or conveyance of the channel or floodway of any tributary to the main stream, drainage ditch, or any other drainage facility or system. D, structures, buildings, recreational vehicles, and sanitary and utility systems, if permitted, shall meet the applicable performance standards of the floodway fringe district and shall be constructed or aligned to present the minimum possible resistance to flood flows. E, structures, if permitted, shall have a low flood damage potential and shall not be for human habitation. F, storage of materials or equipment that are buoyant, flammable, explosive, or injurious to human, animal, or plant life is prohibited. Storage of other material may be allowed if readily removable from the floodway district within the time available after flood warning. G, water course alterations or relocations, channel changes and modifications must be designed to maintain the flood carrying capacity within the altered or relocated portion In addition, such alterations or relocations must be approved by the Department of Natural Resources. H, any fill allowed in the floodway must be shown to have some beneficial purpose and shall be limited to the minimum amount necessary. I, pipeline, river, or stream crossings shall be buried in the stream bed and banks or otherwise sufficiently protected to prevent rupture due to channel degradation and meandering or due to the action of flood flows. 1007 floodway fringe overlay district. Permitted uses. All development within the floodway fringe district shall be permitted to the extent they are not prohibited by any other ordinance or underlying zoning district, and provided they meet applicable performance standards of the floodway fringe district. Performance standards. All development must be consistent with the need to minimize flood damage and meet the following applicable performance standards. Until a regulatory floodway is designated, no development may increase the base flood elevation more than 1 foot. The applicant will be responsible for providing the Department of Natural Resources with sufficient technical information to make such determination. A, all development shall, 1, be designed and adequately anchored to prevent flotation, collapse, or lateral movement. 2, use construction methods and practices that will minimize flood damage. 3, use construction materials and utility equipment that are resistant to flood damage. B, residential structures. All new or substantially improved residential structures shall have the lowest floor, including basement, elevated a minimum of 1 foot above the base flood elevation. Construction shall be upon compacted fill, which shall at all points be no lower than 1 foot above the base flood elevation and extend at such elevation at least 18 feet beyond the limits of any structure erected thereon. Alternate methods of elevating, such as piers or extended foundations, may be allowed subject to favorable consideration by the Board of Adjustment, where existing topography, street grades, or other factors preclude elevating by fill. In such cases, the methods used must be adequate to support the structure as well as withstand the various forces and hazards associated with flooding. All new residential structures located in areas that would become isolated due to flooding of surrounding ground shall be provided with a means of access that will be passable by a wheeled vehicle during the base flood. However, this criteria shall not apply where the administrator determines there is sufficient flood warning time for the protection of life and property. When estimating flood warning time, consideration shall be given to the criteria listed in 567-75.2, paragraph 3 of the Iowa Administrative Code. C, non-residential structures. All new or substantially improved non-residential structures shall have the lowest floor, including basement, elevated a minimum of 1 foot above the base flood elevation, or together with attendant utility and sanitary systems, be floodproof to such a level. When floodproofing is utilized, a professional engineer registered in the state of Iowa shall certify that the floodproofing methods used are adequate to withstand the flood depths, pressures, velocities, impact and uplift forces, and other factors associated with the base flood, and that the structure below the base flood elevation is watertight, with walls substantially impermeable to the passage of water. A record of the certification indicating the specific elevation in relation to the North American Vertical Data 1988, to which any structures are floodproof shall be maintained by the administrator. D, all new and substantially improved structures. 1, fully enclosed areas below the lowest floor, not including basements, that are subject to flooding shall be designed to automatically equalize hydrostatic flood forces on exterior walls by allowing for the entry and exit of flood waters. Designs for meeting this requirement must either be certified by a registered professional engineer or meet or exceed the following minimum criteria. A minimum of 2 openings with positioning on at least 2 walls, having a total net area of not less than 1 square inch for every square foot of enclosed area subject to flooding shall be provided. B, the bottom of all openings shall be no higher than 1 foot above grade. And C, openings may be equipped with screens, louvers, valves, or other coverings or devices, provided they permit the automatic entry and exit of floodwaters. Such areas shall be used solely for parking vehicles, building access, and low damage potential storage. Where the distance between the floor and the ceiling of fully enclosed area below the lowest floor is 5 feet or more, the applicant shall be required to sign and record with the Winneshiek County Recorder a non-conversion agreement that ensures the lower enclosed area remains compliant with the criteria outlined in section 1007, paragraph 2, subparagraph D. 1. Really losing the crowd around here.
Yeah. Go and recruit some people.
I didn't write it. Come on. 2, new and substantially improved structures must be designed or modified and adequately anchored to prevent flotation, collapse, or lateral movement of the structure resulting from hydrodynamic and hydrostatic loads, including the effects of buoyancy. 3, new and substantially improved structures shall be constructed with electric meter, electric service panel box, hot water heater, heating, air conditioning, ventilation equipment, including the ductwork, and other similar machinery and equipment elevated, or in the case of non-residential structures, optionally flood-proof, to a minimum of 1 foot above the base flood elevation. 4, new and substantially improved structures shall be constructed with the plumbing, gas lines, water, gas meters, and other similar service utilities either elevated, or in the case of non-residential structures, optionally flood-proof to a minimum of 1 foot above the base flood elevation, or designed to be watertight and withstand inundation to such a level. E, factory-built homes. 1, all new and substantially improved factory-built homes, including those placed in existing factory-built home parks or subdivisions, shall be elevated on a permanent foundation such that the lowest floor of the structure is a minimum of 1 foot above the base flood elevation. 2, all new and substantially improved factory-built homes, including those placed in existing factory-built home parks or subdivisions, shall be anchored to resist flotation, collapse, or lateral movement. Anchored systems may include, but are not limited to, the use of over-the-top or frame ties to ground anchors as required by the state building code. F, utility and sanitary systems. 1, on-site wastewater disposal and water supply systems shall be located or designed to avoid impairment to the system or contamination from the system during flooding. 2, all new and replacement sanitary sewage systems shall be designed to minimize or eliminate infiltration of floodwaters into the system, as well as the discharge of effluent into floodwaters. Wastewater treatment facilities other than on-site systems shall be provided with a level of flood protection equal to or greater than 1 foot above the base flood elevation. 3, new or replacement water supply systems shall be designed to minimize or eliminate infiltration of floodwaters into the system. Water supply treatment facilities other than on-site systems shall be provided with a level of protection equal to or greater than 1 foot above the base flood elevation. 4, utilities such as gas or electric systems shall be located and constructed to minimize or eliminate flood damage to the system and the risks associated with such flood damage or impaired systems. G, storage of materials and equipment that are flammable, explosive, or injurious to human, animal, or plant life is prohibited unless elevated a minimum of 1 foot above the base flood elevation. Other material and equipment must either be similarly elevated or not subject to major flood damage and be anchored to prevent movement due to flood waters, or be readily removable from the area within the time available after flood warning. H, flood control structural works, such as levees, flood walls, shall provide at a minimum protection from the base flood with a minimum of 3 foot of design freeboard and shall provide for adequate interior drainage. In addition, the Department of Natural Resources shall approve the structural flood control works. I, Watercourse alterations or relocations must be designed to maintain the flood carrying capacity within the altered or relocated portion. In addition, the Department of Natural Resources must approve such alterations or relocations. J, subdivisions, including factory-built home parks and subdivisions, shall be consistent with the need to minimize flood damages and shall have adequate drainage provided to reduce exposure to flood damage. Development associated with subdivision proposals, including the installation of public utilities, shall meet the applicable performance standards of this ordinance. Subdivision proposals intended for residential use shall provide all lots with a means of access which will be passable by wheeled vehicles during the base flood. Proposals for subdivisions greater than 5 acres or 50 lots, whichever is less, shall include base flood elevation data for those areas located within the floodway fringe overlay district. K, accessory structures to residential uses. 1, detached garages, sheds, and similar structures that are identical to a residential use, or similar structures that are incidental to a residential use are exempt from the base flood elevation requirements where the following criteria are satisfied. A, the structure shall be designed to have low flood damage potential. Its size shall not exceed 600 square feet in size. Those portions of the structure located less than 1 foot above the base flood elevation must be constructed of flood-resistant materials. B, the structure shall be used solely for low flood damage potential purposes, such as vehicle parking and limited storage. The structure shall not be used for human habitation. C, the structure shall be constructed and placed on the building site so as to offer minimum resistance to the flow of floodwaters. D, the structure shall be firmly anchored to prevent flotation, collapse, and lateral movement, which may result in damage to other structures. E, the structure's service facilities, such as electrical and heating equipment, shall be elevated or flood-proof to at least 1 foot above the base flood elevation. And F, the structure's walls shall include openings that satisfy the provisions of Section 1007, paragraph 2, subparagraph D, 1 of this ordinance. 2, exemption from the base flood elevation requirements for such a structure may result in increased premium rates for flood insurance coverage of the structure and its contents. L, recreational vehicles. 1, recreational vehicles are exempt from the requirements of Section 1007, paragraph 2, subparagraph E of this ordinance regarding anchoring and elevation of factory-built homes when the following criteria are satisfied. The recreational vehicle shall be located on site for less than 180 consecutive days. And the recreational vehicle must be fully licensed and ready for highway use. A recreational vehicle is ready for highway use if it is on its wheels or jacking system and is attached to the site only by quick disconnect type utilities and service devices and has no permanently attached additions. 2, recreational vehicles that are located on site for more than 180 consecutive days or are not ready for highway use must satisfy the requirements of 1007 paragraph 2 subparagraph E of this ordinance regarding anchoring and elevation of factory-built homes. M, pipeline, river, and stream crossings shall be buried in the stream bed and banks or otherwise sufficiently protected to provide rupture due to channel degradation and meandering. And maximum damage potential development. All new or substantially improved maximum damage potential development shall have the lowest floor, including basement, elevated a minimum of 1 foot above the elevation of the 500-year flood, or together with attendant utility and sanitary systems, be floodproof to such a level. When floodproofing is utilized, a professional engineer registered in the state of Iowa shall certify that the floodproofing methods used are adequate to withstand the flood depths, pressures, velocities, impact, and uplift forces, and other factors associated with the 2% annual chance, the 0.2% annual chance flood, and that the structure below the 0.2 annual percent chance flood elevation is watertight with walls substantially impermeable to the passage of water. A record of the certification indicating the specific elevation in relation to the North American Vertical Datum 1988, to which any structure flood-proof shall be maintained by the administrator. Where the 0.2% chance flood elevation data has not been provided in the flood insurance study, the Iowa Department of Natural Resources shall be contacted to compute such data. The applicant will be responsible for providing the Department of Natural Resources with sufficient technical information to make such determinations. Section 1008, General Floodplain Overlay District. Permitted uses. All development within the General Floodplain District shall be permitted to the extent they are not prohibited by any other ordinance or underlying zoning district, and provided they meet the applicable performance standards of the General Floodplain District. B, any development which involves placement of structures, factory-built homes, fill, or other obstructions, storage of materials or equipment, excavation or alteration of a water course shall be reviewed by the Department of Natural Resources to determine, 1, whether the land involved is either wholly or partly within the floodway or floodway fringe, and 2, the base flood elevation. The applicant shall be responsible for providing the Department of Natural Resources with sufficient technical information to make the determination. C, review by the Department of Natural Resources is not required for the proposed construction of a new or replacement bridge or culvert where, 1, the bridge or culvert is located on a stream that drains less than 100 square miles, and 2, the bridge or culvert is not associated with a channel modification that constitutes a channel change as specified in 567-71.2, paragraph 1B of the Iowa Administrative Code. Performance standards. All development or portions thereof to be located in the floodway as determined by the Department of Natural Resources shall meet the applicable provisions and standards of the Floodway Overlay District, section 1006. B, development or portions thereof to be located in the floodway fringe as determined by the Department of Natural Resources shall meet the applicable provisions and standards of the Floodway Fringe Overlay District, section 1007. You're on the edge of your seat, aren't you? It's getting good. Yeah, to the end. Good part's coming up.
Yeah.
He's gonna do a tap dance at the end.
Yeah.
You're gonna know it for the second and third reading.
Save those days.
You should have recorded it. Then you could
It
display
is. It is.
There we go.
1009, appointment and duties of the Board of Adjustment. Appointment and duties of the Board of Adjustment. A Board of Adjustment is hereby established which shall hear and decide 1, appeals, and 2, requests for variances to the provisions of this ordinance, and shall take any other action which is required of the board. Appeals, where it is alleged there is any error in any order, requirement, decision, or determination made by an administrative official in the enforcement of this ordinance, the aggrieved party may appeal such action. The notice of appeal shall be filed with the Board of Adjustment and with the official from whom the appeal is taken, and shall set forth the specific reason for the appeal. The official from whom the appeal is taken shall transmit to the Board of Adjustment all documents constituting the record upon which the action appealed from was taken. Variance. The Board of Adjustment may authorize upon request in specific cases such variances from the terms of this ordinance that will not be contrary to the public interest, where, owing to special conditions, a literal enforcement of the provisions of this ordinance will result in unnecessary hardship. Variances granted must meet the following applicable standards. A, variance shall only be granted upon 1, showing of good and sufficient cause, 2, a determination that failure to grant the variance would result in exceptional hardship to the applicant, and 3, a determination that the granting of the variance will not result in increased flood heights, additional threats to public safety, extraordinary public expense, create nuisance, cause fraud on or victimization of the public, or conflict with existing local codes or ordinances. B, variances shall not be issued within any designated floodway if any increase in flood levels during the base flood would result. Consideration of the effects of any development on base flood levels shall be based upon the assumption that an equal degree of development would be allowed for similarly situated lands. C, variances shall only be granted upon a determination that the variance is the minimum necessary considering the flood hazard to afford relief. D, in cases where the variance involves a lower level of flood protection for structures than what is ordinarily required by this ordinance, the applicant shall be notified in writing over the signature of the administrator that, one, the issuance of a variance will result in increased premium rates for flood insurance up to the amounts as high as $25 for $100 worth of insurance coverage. And two, such construction increases risk to life and property. E, all variances granted shall have the concurrence or approval of the Department of Natural Resources. Hearings and decisions of the Board of Adjustment. Hearings upon the filing with the Board of Adjustment of an appeal or request for a variance, the board shall hold a public hearing. The board shall fix a reasonable time for the hearing and give public notice thereof, as well as due notice to parties in interest. At the hearing, any party may appear in person or by agent or attorney and present written or oral evidence. The board may require the appellant, the board may require the appellant or applicant to provide such information as is necessary, as is reasonably deemed necessary, and may request the technical assistance and or evaluation of a professional engineer or other expert person or agency, including the Department of Natural Resources. B, decisions. The board shall arrive at a decision on an appeal or variance within a reasonable time. In passing upon an appeal, the board may, so long as such action is in conformity with the provisions of this ordinance, reverse or affirm wholly or in part, or modify the order, requirement, decision, or determination appealed from, and it shall make its decision in writing, setting forth the findings of fact and the reasons for its decision. In granting a variance, the board shall consider such factors contained in this section and all other relevant sections of this ordinance and may prescribe such conditions as contained in Chapter 1009, Section 4, Paragraph B, subparagraph 2. 1. Factors upon which the decision of the Board of Adjustment shall be based. In passing upon applications for variances, the board shall consider all relevant factors specified in other sections of this ordinance and A, the danger to life and property due to increased flood heights or velocities caused by encroachments. B, the danger that materials may be swept onto other land or downstream to the injury of others. C, the proposed water supply and sanitation systems and the ability of these systems to prevent disease, contamination, and unsanitary conditions. D, the susceptibility of the proposed facility and its contents to flood damage and the effect of such damage on the individual owner. E, the importance of the services provided by the proposed facility to the county. F, the requirements of the facility for a floodplain location. G, the availability of alternative locations not subject to flooding for the proposed use. H, the compatibility of the proposed use with existing development and development anticipated in the foreseeable future. I, the relationship of the proposed use to the comprehensive plan and floodplain management program for the area. J, the safety of access to the property in times of flood for ordinary and emergency vehicles. K, the expected heights, velocity, duration, rate of rise, and sediment transport of the floodwater expected at the site. L, the cost of providing governmental services during and after flood conditions, including maintenance and repair of public utilities, sewer, gas, electrical, and water systems, facilities, streets, and bridges. M, such other factors which are relevant to the purpose of this ordinance. 2, conditions attached to variances. Upon consideration of the factors listed above, the Board of Adjustment may attach such conditions to the granting of variances as it deems necessary to further the purpose of this ordinance. Such conditions may include, but are not necessarily limited to, A, modification of waste disposal and water supply facilities. B, limitation of periods of use and operation. C, imposition of operational controls, sureties, and deed restrictions. D, requirements for construction of channel modifications, dikes, levees, and other protective measures, provided such are approved by the Department of Natural Resources and are deemed the only practical alternative to achieving the purpose of this ordinance. E, floodproofing measures shall be designed consistent with the flood protection elevation for the particular area, flood velocity, duration, rate of rise, hydrostatic and hydrodynamic forces, and other factors associated with regulatory flooding. The Board of Adjustment shall require that the applicant submit a plan or document certified by a registered professional engineer that the floodproofing measures are consistent with the regulatory flood protection elevation and associated flood factors for the particular use. Appeals to court. Any person or persons jointly or severally aggrieved by any decision of the Board of Adjustment may present to a court of record a petition duly verified, setting forth that such decision is illegal in whole or in part, specifying the grounds of the illegality. Such petition shall be presented to the court within 30 days after the filing of the decision in the office of the board. Now, non-conforming uses. A structure or use of a structure or premises which was lawful before the passage or amendment of this ordinance, but which is not in conformity with the provisions of this ordinance, may be continued, subject to the following conditions. If such use is discontinued for 6 consecutive months, any future use of the building premises shall conform to this ordinance. B, uses or adjuncts, therefore, that are or become nuisances shall not be entitled to continue as non-conforming uses. C, if any non-conforming use or structure is destroyed by any means, including flood, it shall not be reconstructed if the cost is more than 50% of the market value of the structure before the damage occurred, unless it is reconstructed in conformity with the provisions of this ordinance. This limitation does not include the cost of any alteration to comply with the existing state or local health, sanitary, building, or safety codes or regulations, or the cost of any alteration of a structure listed on the National Register of Historic Places, provided that the alteration shall not preclude its continued designation. Except as provided in 10.10.1b, any use which has been permitted as a variance shall be considered a conforming use. 1011, penalties for violation. Violations of the provisions of this ordinance or failure to comply with any of the requirements, including violations of conditions and safeguards established in connection with grants of variances, shall constitute a misdemeanor. Any person who violates this ordinance or fails to comply with any of its requirements shall, upon conviction thereof, be fined not more than $500 or imprisoned for not more than 30 days. Each day such violation continues shall be considered a separate offense. Nothing herein contained prevents Winneshiek County from taking such other lawful action as is necessary to prevent or remedy violation. 10.12, amendments. The regulations and standards set forth in this ordinance may from time to time be amended, supplemented, changed, or repealed. No amendment, supplement, change, or modification shall be undertaken without prior approval of the Department of Natural Resources. 2, the official copies of the zoning ordinance of Winneshiek County will be modified to reflect this change. Repealer, all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with the zoning ordinance or inconsistent with provisions of this ordinance are hereby repealed to the extent necessary to give this ordinance full force and effect. Effective date, this ordinance shall be in full force and effect after its passage and publication as provided by law. That's it.
Good job.
Second reading? Did you want to take an action on that? Either set it to waive the additional readings?
I would second that.
We have a motion and a second to waive the additional readings. All those in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Didn't hear you, Tony.
All opposed, nay.
Thank you.
Now you can move
Thank
to
you.
adopt it if you wish.
I would move to adopt the National Flood Insurance Program.
I would second that.
Motion and second to adopt the National Flood Insurance Program ordinance. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Be a roll call.
Surely.
Aye, and I'll amend my motion to say, to adopt the Winneshiek County's zoning ordinance amendment to add the floodplain management, chapter 10.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye also. Motion passes unanimous.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Tony.
You will sign, I will sign, I'll get it recorded, and then Tony will get it printed. Be printed in the newspaper.
Hey,
Yeah.
that's a supplement.
Yeah.
So,
We had 10:20.
Miscellaneous yet.
no, I'm well aware of that. I was just gonna ask a question, but when you sent out to us on going over the ordinances, change them, do we have to read the whole?
I do not know how that works. I'm guessing that the way you publish the readoption, the ordinance that readopts the existing ordinance, that has to be published when you do it. So maybe if it adopts only some of them, then that would be just that one ordinance. If you want to change any of the ordinances that are existing, then those would all need to go through the process of readings and so on.
That's what I thought. Okay, we'll go back to the 10:20 miscellaneous items. First of all, CLG Annual Report.
And so I sent this out last week so you could review it. It's the report by the Winneshiek County Historic Preservation Commission. And so I've got 2 copies here I'd like to have signed because they'd like to have one on file for them too.
Move to accept the CLG annual report.
Second.
The motion is second to accept the CLG Annual Report. Any further discussion? None. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Yeah.
That's page. If you sign it, they submit it with the Iowa Department of Historic Preservation, whatever it's. IDPH. That's a different.
Next up, the Actuarial Services Agreement with formerly Silverstone Group.
So we're required by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board to have a actuarial review of our post-employment benefits. So basically what effect, what liability to put on our financial statements for people who've retired but are still on our insurance or still, enrolled in IPERS and things. IPERS actually does their own, so we get anyway, those liabilities then are reported on our financial statements by Akron Nelson. So we have to have this done every other year. used to be Silverstone Group was the name of the company. We've had do it since it's been required. And so they've been acquired now by this Hub International Group. So I would recommend we just hire them to do this. It's less than $5,000 a year usually to do it. So it, or every other year, but it is required.
I moved to hire Hub to do our actuarial services agreement,
Second.
do our actuarial services.
We have a motion and a second for the actuarial services agreement with Hub. Is there any further discussion? None. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carries unanimous.
Do we carry much, Ben, as far as post-employment in health insurance?
That's what this figures. And so I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but that's the main post-employment benefit that this actuarial opinion will figure. The IPERS also has an actuarial opinion done for all entities. And then they give us our share, which is also reported as a liability on our. And if you remember, the hospital commented about their line since they're a IPERS employer also. So that was also added at the same time by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board.
Yeah, Upper Explorer Land, same way, they have the same.
Get an assigned amount that we record as a liability.
Have we had any actual claims?
No, this is basically saying IPERS is whatever it is, 90% funded. And so if everyone just quit paying right now and you had to pay the benefits still for that are already accrued, how much would each entity need to put in? Yeah, so. IPERS is one of the most healthy government funded retirement plans in the country. So we're lucky that way. And with the increased in yields on investments now that we're seeing now compared to a few years ago, I'm sure that will make them more healthy in the next few years. But that was the big reason a lot of them were getting so unhealthy, is that they were still paying the same promised benefits, and interest rates and yields were so low that they were coming out and it's getting worse and worse and worse. So
that stock market crash and
You wouldn't want to be Chicago or California.
yeah. So yeah, I would never see a claim against these actuarial opinions. They're just things that we have to show as liabilities on our financial statements. Ready to talk about budget?
Yep.
Okay, so I handed out these two. I think you should already have. There's this one. And then this one, it's just a breakdown of the library total that's on your chart, how much it breaks down per library under there. So I just thought I'd hand that out for your information. So these are completely, you can still change any of these numbers, and when we do the next run, we can change them. So if you would want to put the 100,000 back in for development of tourism, you just have to let me know. If you want to increase or decrease any of these, we can still finish that. The library association, so the reason it was the 173, 136, which was more than the request, is that they had verbally requested, not in their written request, to continue the additional funding of 2,500 per library. So that's what's included on this run. So that's just for your information, what we are currently in on this run. I'm going to pass this one around. This is also informative. It isn't really part of the numbers are in the first run, but because it was brought up at a previous meeting and discussed, I just thought I'd let you know what the totals are. This is the total budget for the rural waste collection. You can see what you're spending on that. And really has no effect, I don't think, on the actual budget run itself. I don't think we have time at this point to make any decision on continuation or cancellation of that program. But, so we put it in the budget as continuing it. And then if you decide to cancel it, you just know you'll save that money. And next year you'll have more money left. So I'm just passing it around so you can see what it is. Maybe talk about it through the spring and decide if you want to keep.
How is that funded? The
Rural fund, all rural property tax. Okay.
Could that money be put into like the road?
It cannot be put in the road because
It's
you're
in the rural
already
supplement.
transferring the maximum to roads. There's very little that could actually go into other than helping reduce your levy rate for.
But it's still a savings overall,
Yes.
really.
Yeah.
And I would agree with everybody around the table that has discussed this so far, that is someplace we could cut.
Okay, and so, yes, and this year, our growth rate, we were actually negative in the rural fund. So there is no restriction on our levy rate, but in future years, it very likely could be that we're required to lower rural levy rate because it's under the same restrictions as our general fund rate. I'm just gonna, I'll pass some of these. These are your raw numbers. And I have some notes to tell you about these here, but so you don't have to get up and go pick that up again. Make extra copies, so I'll pass them on here in the room.
That, like the money, the rural fund could be used to support fire trucks or can't do that? How about the pumps for rural?
No.
If you're giving it, those are, yeah, the rural fund is restricted on what it can use. You have a lot less flexibility. It is supposed to be used on for
Rural,
services that only are for rural residents.
rural waste, library, Tony and Doug's salary, soil and water conservation. So ones that I got down,
Yeah.
I know them right off the hand.
And then the state restricts us somewhat.
Then we can, we have that,
Yeah.
yeah, that lawnmower or the mower, not lawnmower,
You
but
could
tractor.
put you can do
Can we,
ditch maintenance, because you could consider that outside of the road, and so we have put money in for that and used it to buy some of the equipment for maintenance of the right of way.
can we up that amount or not?
Yeah.
Like
I
that
think we
tractor
probably
that we just
should.
bought, that.
Yeah, that came out of there, yep.
We could up that too. If we got money in there without changing the levy, I would say up that to about 200 or 175, so we can get a tractor mower and a brush cutter for the wheeled excavator. What I would say. That would be the recommendation there, because I think there's pretty good carryover there.
Didn't we just get a tractor recently for some of the
Yeah,
ditch
but we're
work?
still way behind.
We
And
did,
if we can get them, we might as well get them
Yeah.
before they keep going up.
Yeah.
is that the tractor? We still haven't sold the old one yet. Is that,
What?
we still haven't sold the old tractor?
Oh, yeah.
Is that the one that was going-
Sweeties or whatever? Yeah, they're gone.
Which was the one
Okay.
going to Fort Atkinson or was looking to buy?
I know that the last one we bought isn't, we haven't actually gotten it yet.
Yeah. So we haven't.
The
sold it.
ones that we got in, that we actually acquired, there was one, we bought two that one summer, one was on the lot, so we got it right away. The other one, I think, probably has been delivered by now or is soon. But the last one we got quotes on was just this fall, which is not for another.
Be this next,
Yeah,
this next year's.
yeah. Okay, so first run to I'll look at these two as reference for the raw numbers, and here's my notes. Rather than trying to talk through all this and you jot down stuff, I made some note sheet. So Here's my notes on expenses. After meeting with the Emergency Management Commission and talking with you last week, we moved the 900,000 out of the general fund. It's going to be paid through emergency management. So therefore it goes into the supplemental fund. Same as the agreement we have for the new IT person. So that took that 900,000 out of the general fund. It increased per your recommendations of last week. Just, I put this in there so you knew what this includes. It includes the 2.75% increase for the union employees, the 2.75% adjustment to the matrix for the non-union employees, the non-union, non-elected. What that means, just so you know, is that most of the employees will get 2.75% increase, but if they happen to land on one of those years that changes their column as well, then they actually get a 5.25% increase, because that's a 2.5% adjustment when they hit those years. Most employees were, because we just transitioned into this program, that put them at the beginning of one of the columns. So it's really only some of the people who were at the low end or our new employees that are going to hit the extra bump this year. But that's included in there. And then per the procedure, we include the full comp board recommendation, and then there's a separate action you take after the budget is adopted on how much of the comp board recommendation you wish to adopt. So that's it, what's in the first run.
So what is that? What do you mean by that?
The procedure is that the comp board makes a recommendation. That's included in the budget.
But we
And
can take
then-
that out after.
Yes, and then after the public hearing and after you adopt the budget, there is a separate action you have to take saying how much of the comp board recommendation you're going to approve. But it's included in there.
It has to go in the
Yeah,
upfront.
while we're doing the calculation. So in the current budget, for the current year, you only adopted 80% of the recommendation last year. So the budget, what's in the budget is actually more than what the salaries that are being paid, but that's the way it works. Does not include the additional conservation employee. Includes the funding for the other agencies as this chart I just handed out. I also had a few other things I had to put in that I didn't know for sure what numbers to put in, but so I included 25,000 for HR services for next fiscal year, and I actually included 15,000 in the current year. I didn't put that on the notes. But if we approve one of these contracts, I'm assuming we're gonna get started right away. So how much to put in, I didn't really know, but that's what I put in for a placeholder, was 25 for next year and 15 in the current year. We actually had a 5,000 budget in the current year that that we'll have to amend more if we end up getting going on this and need to add that up, bump that up. Includes 250,000 both in the current year and next year for the building purchase. We have the signed, I emailed that out this morning, so you may not have seen it yet, but we do have the signed purchase agreement. So now it is a public record. So talk about that in a public meeting. And this first run includes 300,000 for infrastructure fund, which I'll cover down below. The revenue that I've included in this first run is estimate of 250,000 for the sale of the land in Freeport, and for the current year, that was taking the Dave Kelly or Mike Kelly's appraisal times
Can we
per acre.
out, when we haven't even accepted bids yet?
That's covered here in a minute. Okay. So that's using his appraisal times the number of acres, and it comes out to be about 250,000. So I put that in as if that happens. It also increases, have noticed some increase in the local option sales tax the last few years, which if you look at this one, local option sales tax comes in under the miscellaneous receipts on the revenue side right here. That's not the only miscellaneous receipt, but that's a big chunk of them. And so you can see there's been some higher numbers there. And so that's where that's showing up. So it's actually driving our ending balance up some. So I've increased that from what in the current year we had 1.2 million. I bumped that up to 1.5 million for next year. It might even be more than that. I think last year we hit 1.9 million, but I don't want to put in a really high number and then have it come in low.
Not have it there.
So I think it's reasonable to bump it up some, but that's what I used. Okay, so infrastructure fund, we got 300,000 that I put in there. 50,000 is the road at Nessie Park. So that's where we said to put it for now is in the general fund, which is part of the infrastructure fund. That's where it is. The other 250,000, I listed 4 things here. And actually I thought of a 5th one when Michael was in this morning. So I'll go through those. So if we do not sell the land in Freeport, you should just ignore this because you don't have this 250,000. So that's the first option. So that covers what Shirley just asked me.
No, what I was asking is now this is an open meeting and it's out there what the land is worth before we've accepted bids.
This is only an estimate. It's something to put a placeholder in the budget. I have no idea what the bids will come in at. That's just an estimate. You could use the 250,000 to make an additional payment on the building. Could use the 250,000 towards the new shop at Locust, or I know that Michael has a couple of smaller bridge projects that only have local funding options that there are things that need to get done and he doesn't even know if there's enough money to do it. So those would be places you could use it. If you do use it for some of those projects, that'll help then him save spending his local money to get his ending fund balance up, which has been kind of an issue lately. I'll just throw in there under that line basically, because he mentioned if it comes to the point where you want to bid the W-14 and there isn't enough money in even after taking the spill bill out, there isn't enough money in your farm to market account. You could deposit money into the farm to market account to get that balance up so you could bid that project. So that would be another road option for that 250,000. And then we would have to kind of decide this now because we could say we're going to pay 250,000 out of that 900,000. But we don't know if we're selling the land yet, so it's kind of hard to do that, but that would lower what we would need to do in our supplemental rate. So those are some options for that 250,000. Again, that 250 on the revenue was a complete guess. We didn't ever open the first 2 bids, so we don't really know what that's gonna come in at.
May not even happen, who knows?
Yeah.
That may not even take, or
Yeah.
want to bid.
Nope. Levy notes, so this is because we had such a low growth rate, we'll get to use the same levy rate for both general and rural. So this includes the same levy rate for general. You can see on this page. So this is outlined, the levy rates are outlined here just for historical purposes. You can see where they've been over the last few years. This is the important one. The goal is to be at about 25% carryover. So using the general levy rate, the same as last year, including these funding we've had, we're at 23.29%. It's not quite 25%, but I think we have some, the fact that we're including 300,000 of infrastructure fund and 500,000 in building purchase is included in our total expenditures. So if you took that out, because those are one-time things, this same dollar amount would actually be a higher percentage rate. It isn't unhealthy to go a little bit below the 25%. I would not, even with those other things taken out, I would not want this to go below 20, because then you're getting too unhealthy. But I think sitting in between 20 and 25% isn't pushing it, but I don't want to push it. I think we have, historically, what happens is that at the end of the year, we have departments that don't spend all their money, so the money goes back in. So you can see last year, we were sitting, I think it was a little over 25% as the expected carryover, and we ended up at like 36% at the end of the year. So that's good. It means that we didn't spend everything we could have, so it helps us this year, but we can't always depend on that. Plus, if you have a budget amendment, that takes money out of that. I have figured in these big ones already to anticipated spending, that 250,000 and the HR spending. So I figured that in as anticipated, that we will use them in a budget amendment already. So we got that figured in. Supplemental levy rate, I just had to calculate what we needed to hit that 25%. So that's why that number is what it is. Didn't meet Mark's hope that we could stay under $3, but that's what we need to keep a healthy balance in that. You can see that our ending balance has been going down some in that fund. So we have been deficit spending some. So at some point we have to just raise the rate and try to stick to that 25% to make keep the money we need to keep in there to make payments. Rural services. So this is the one that our levy rate is higher than it needs to be. If we didn't have these restrictions coming from the state that restricts how much we can levy each year, I would probably recommend lowering this levy rate some, because we're up to 80% carryover. But if you lower it this year, then next year, that's your baseline. So then you can't raise it again at all.
No.
So like Mark suggested, one possibility might be to kind of stimulate your right-of-way maintenance, is put a little more in that line that's for buying a tractor and get two this year or whatever, gets a little more equipment this year, get that upgraded and show a little more spending. We have 113,000 is what we put in that line. It's been the same amount since I started in 2009.
I would say 200 would.
So they've never increased that.
No.
And so that might be a good place to spend some of that extra money rather than lowering the levy rate and then have your hands tied next year.
I don't like the idea of lowering that.
No, because we could use
agree.
Here's
order another mower
this-
tractor and a brush cutter for the
At the cost that
excavator,
it is now.
wheeled
There
excavator.
was I had a conversation with Pat from Howard County at the 6-county meeting. And I asked about how they had jumped their rate last year, anticipating what the state would be doing. It jumped at $1.20. And that because their reserve number was down, I think he said to
Talking about Howard County?
to 11%.
Yeah. So one problem, and I've had a long conversation actually with Julie in Howard County last year, is that they have departments that regularly put huge amounts of fluff in their budget. So when they were doing their budget last year, even jumping at $1.20, they were still in the teens. I don't remember. I think she said 17, but it might have been 13% carryover. Then when the end of the year actually came, they were in like 35% carryover. That was how much money that they had budgeted that they didn't spend. And she said, that's ridiculous. I mean, so now this year they're looking at having too much money. And this is a better problem than not having enough, but they've got too much money. And so they're looking at 35, 40% carryover if they go just by their restricted levy rate. So I don't know what they're gonna do, but yes, that was an issue last year, is that they were down in the teens, but it ended up not materializing at that time.
But we sure don't want to be down looking at anything like that. And we
Yeah,
don't know
no.
what's gonna happen down in Des Moines this year.
Yes.
We know they're.
I mean, there's talk about rolling the supplemental and general all together and making that same restrictions apply. So if that happened that way, I don't know if it would, if that happened that way, it would be to your benefit to have that high this year, just so that you have work, you have room in the next few years.
Well,
It's kind of a moot point in that if they don't do something with the law after 4 more years, you're gonna be, you
Stuck.
have to go down to 350. But hopefully, I have confidence that everyone will get to the table and figure out a way to fix this before then, but.
Historically, even though they may put sunset in there, rarely does it get sunsetted.
I think if we have an opportunity to gain some ground on equipment and things that we've been putting off,
Yeah,
it'd be foolish not.
I'd say let's raise that levy rate to 200,000.
For the road clearing.
Yeah, I
Why?
would say.
200,000.
I mean, because that still don't get you a hell of a lot.
What did you say was that?
113.
Been that way since he's been here. I
Since
mean,
I've been auditor, we've been doing 113. It had just changed about that time. I think before that it was 80. And they
I mean, you
went
should have
to
been
100.
doing
If you would have been,
5-10% a year
Yeah.
increase, you know, just to keep. up
take that
with the
many
cost.
years times, even, we are 100, even
Well, I wonder
200 is,
how many we need to get all the
Well-
contractors where they need to be.
well, we still, and then that, we still doesn't dig us out of the hole on
I
our other
think-
heavy equipment.
No,
I think, but that won't help your actual road equipment.
No.
This has to be equipment specifically used for the right of way maintenance.
So the rubber tire.
But we could do a rubber tired excavator
Is part
and
of
a
that.
brush head.
Well, we could do the brush head for it.
Yeah.
You can do a uniloader with a cutting head, because that goes for
I'd be a
For
little
roadside.
careful about the actual excavator.
itself. You could use the brush cutter,
Yeah, because you're gonna wanna use that on road,
And we
actual
could-
road projects.
use a new track skid loader with the cutting head, because that's what it's.
Basically,
for.
because there's a restriction on how much you can transfer from the rural fund to the road fund. You can't buy something out of the rural fund and then use it on the road, because then you're trying to end around that restriction.
But
So, but if it's specifically only used in the ditch, then you're doing maintenance of the non-road portion.
what if it's a piece of equipment that you use in both places?
Then you could maybe split it.
That's what I
Yeah.
was getting at,
Yeah.
you know.
if you're using it 50% of the time, both ways.
Ditches and the other 50%, then the road department, in theory, could pay for 50%. And
Is cleaning ditches referred to as a ditch?
And we'd have to talk to somebody that.
roadside? I mean, if that's considered roadside, well, you got a pretty big avenue there. I mean, you can, if
We don't
ditch
wanna-
cleaning, but, I mean, because you got a lot of money sitting here that's.
You could even probably put this pretty reasonably up more than 200 if you wanted to
could
go to
put a
250 or
250 easy,
50 or 3,
3, and you can always lower it back down.
or just not spend it if you
yeah, just not.
save it.
Right.
Yeah, we could just,
You could authorize, as the year goes, you can authorize expenses.
for the one roadside management position we have right now, can those wages be paid out of this ditch?
Yes, so that was an idea when you had even a bigger roadside maintenance department, was that we could pay for them out of the wages out of this line. Now, you have to be careful, because if, I know that he
Plow
will
snow
plow
and
snow
snow
and
and
things too, so you'd
so
have
now
to,
you,
they'd have to break it down and say, which they do, they already break down on his time card, they record how much they spend doing different duties, because it's already for the DOT, they want to know how much time they spend plowing snow versus how much time they spend building a bridge versus, that's already in
or
there.
even ditch cleaning, they're out there chainsaws cleaning ditch roads too. So I mean, you
You could,
you
and,
got-
and that's what,
got a big avenue there you could pull loosen up the road fund.
Before we started buying these bigger pieces of equipment, they used to do that more, where they would take time of employees spent cleaning in the ditches and charge it to that line, but then it got to the point where we spent it all on equipment, so that was more paperwork than it was worth trying to do it.
I mean, I would say maybe raise it to 300,000, because if you can take an employee and equipment, it don't take long.
We are so
It
far.
don't take
behind.
long to pick up 100,000 of wages.
Whenever you're paying the employees and you're taking it out of the secondary road fund and you're paying it out of this ditch program, leaves more funding.
Yeah, we got more funding, loosens up,
Which we all know.
loosen up another 200,000.
I mean, we got a lot of back work on trees that we've got to
Yeah.
deal with.
So would it make more sense to hire another?
No, we got enough employees. We got people enough. We don't need more people. We got, just utilize what we got.
Well,
And just
we
pay,
want to make sure we continue to save in the roadside program though, and mow where we need to, and spray where we need to, and brush clear where we need to, but not using more fuel and more labor to do more than we need to.
Then don't want to hire another person. That would be, that's what you're saying. You're saying not spend any more money, but you want to hire another person.
Well, it
that
saves
just
in
defeats
the
the purpose.
long run, like we argued last year, it saves in the
No.
long run on
No, it doesn't.
mowing and the fuel and the
No, it
chemicals.
doesn't.
I'm not gonna argue with you about it again, but the facts are there. So I'm just wondering, you're just talking about more newer equipment for roadside cleaning.
Well, yeah,
And maybe working out a procedure to
Transfer
pay,
some of the salary.
transfer some salary
when we're
money.
paying,
They're doing brush clearing. Todd,
Todd, yes, when we're paying Todd, when he's doing road clearing, ditch clearing, that would be paid out of this line versus
Yeah.
one of the road department lines. And I think we'll have to work with the engineer's office. We'll have to set that up, but I think that would be reasonable.
And if we're ditch cleaning like we ditch cleaned all the Conover, I mean, boy, if you could have,
I don't know.
I don't know if that is or isn't, but if it is
It might be different when you're
cleaning
like dirt versus
Versus
taking care
or
of,
the other, yeah.
I think that was under road use, road.
that would be more like road.
That wasn't it.
But I'd say definitely put it at 300. That way you can still buy a mower, tractor,
We
and
don't
a
have,
brush cutter and still have 100,000 to put up
and we don't,
against stuff.
and we don't have to spend it if we don't.
And if we
doesn't work.
don't need it, I mean, we can utilize it.
because even just as of recent, our road crews have been out in full force.
Yeah, they've been working cleaning ditches all winter.
Else to do.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's
So
not
I
usual
would be
winter to do
comfortable
it.
with a conversation with Michael Kueny involved in this discussion to see what are the needs there.
I
He
think-
just had a meeting with the
I think
guys.
today we can
Just put
pick
it
a
at
number, and how we utilize that can be decided then over the
Later.
next several months, because this wouldn't go into effect till July 1 anyway.
put it higher.
But we
Yeah,
put
higher is better.
300,000 for,
I'd put 300.
that will bring your percentage down some there on the,
That'll help, yeah, it'll make that look a little better,
yeah.
because they come and look at your 80% carryover, they'll.
Wonder why.
Wonder why we're taxing them so hard.
And so, yeah, so part of the reason that is up, it isn't because obviously your levy rate has been the same now for whatever it is, 8 years in a row. I mean, that's growing because of that local option sales tax
yeah.
money growing some. I mean, that, obviously, as the inflation goes, even if people buy the same number of things, it costs more money, so they pay more tax.
So the rural waste comes out of that rural fund too, so if we ever did, that would
Mhm.
That would help that.
Yeah. The 150,000,
Well,
170,000.
174, yeah.
And
the state is changing the local options, how much money they're taking of it.
That was proposed last year. It didn't make it into
Which would take a huge cut out of how much we're getting.
the way that, I haven't seen the proposed bill for this year.
I haven't either.
The way the bill was proposed last year, I only did a cursory analysis of it. I don't know that it would have had a major negative impact on us. It was going to take all of the local option sales tax statewide, get rid of it locally, and it wouldn't be a local option sales tax anymore. It's gonna put it all in the statewide, make it a 1 cent sales tax, then take 35 cents or whatever it was out for the DNR program that has been waiting to be funded for a while, and then split up the rest of that money back to counties. Now, I don't know the details of the formula for splitting it up, but my guess is that areas that currently have very large retail sales are gonna be the biggest losers.
Yeah.
Because they, right now, they get all of the retail sales, their 1 cent they get to keep it. So places like Lynn County and Johnson County and Polk County are gonna be the biggest losers on that, because instead of keeping all of their 1 cent sales tax, they're gonna put it into the pot and they're gonna divide it up and send it back. I'm thinking that actually if they're, depending on how they devise that formula, some of the counties that have next to no retail sales that don't have a lot of 1 cent sales tax right now might actually get more. Because now it's getting, they're gonna get some of that out of the bigger counties. Yeah, and so I'm thinking if it's structured that way, that we might be someplace in the middle, since we're, higher than some of our neighbors, but we aren't like the big counties. So it might not have as big of a negative impact as people might think, but I don't know for sure, and they might change the way they're gonna do it anyway when it all plays out. In my mind, since we're having because our local option sales tax is because the cities, right now, the way it works, everything paid in Winneshiek County goes into a pot, and then it's paid to the cities based on population and valuation. There's a formula, they split it up. So the cities get some and then the counties get some.
Cities usually get way more than what they've collected themselves, so that's another way it serves the whole county.
Yeah, and so what happens is what we get, since the city's already got some, what we get has to go through our rural fund. So in my mind, what they should do if they really want to get the general fund levy rate lower, if that's a legislative priority by the legislators think that's their goal, they should allow us to implement a 1 cent sales tax in the county that doesn't go to cities, that goes to the county, but goes to the general fund to replace that property tax. So that everybody in the county is paying it and it all goes to the general fund, then we could lower the general fund levy. I mean, we're at $1.95 on our rural fund levy. That's one of the lowest in the state. We're in the bottom 20 because our local option sales tax is a pretty good revenue generator, and we're using it for property tax relief. That's what we're using it as.
Tell me again why we're not looking at raising rural fund.
Raising it?
Look at our carryover, it's 80%.
We can't legally raise it. It's under the same restrictions as the general. So it's cannot go more than last year because of our valuation change.
But we got an 80% carryover.
But we have quite a bit of
25 is where you want to be, so
we actually have
we got
extra.
55% more carryover than we got a lot of.
I would recommend, if it wasn't these restrictions, I would recommend lowering it, but then we might lose out next year. If our local option sales tax, if they change that and all of a sudden it comes in a different formula and something, and we need that money, we can't go back and raise it after we've lowered it. So I think bumping, at least for this year, this road maintenance account up some to get some new equipment, and maybe some of the employee expenses is a good way to spend some of that extra money without locking yourself into long-term expenses. So next year you could lower it again if you needed to.
What if the engineering department comes up with a good way of tracking exactly the hours and utilizing as much
towards
as we
that
can
to get Yeah.
Because that would pay for like.
See,
the
that's where-
We're gonna save a lot
Oh,
of
yeah.
money for their department, for the other equipment and
That should
everything
be,
else.
that should be a responsibility of a shop foreman. To be,
Like that.
Can we only raise that once a year? Or can you raise it during that 300,000?
Well, you can raise it anytime. You just gotta make sure you have enough money in there. You can't, you only set your levies once a year.
Yeah.
So you could amend it and put more in there later, especially since you know you have a pretty good carryover.
So we have the chance to increase it.
You could increase that line item later, yeah.
So probably hold where it's at for now.
Yeah.
If he comes up with a way of tracking hours and we can divert that to pay for other.
Yeah, we can,
uses.
yeah, I would definitely.
Are there any other changes you want me to put in a second run? That would be the next question. Are there any of these other assumptions or numbers I put in? I mean, should I lower the Freeport land sale to a lower amount?
Well, that's just a wish wash anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, it don't matter what that is. It just ain't gonna.
Can we?
If we don't get it, it just comes off that. It ain't gonna change.
Yeah.
Cause it's an in and out.
Yeah.
It's just an in and out, so that don't really matter what it is. If we don't get it, we don't spend the 250.
If you don't get it, you just. don't
Yeah,
get
it just.
Whatever the amount is, if you happen to get, if it goes for 500,000, then you have more you can spend on some
Then
other.
if it's zero, it's zero. Yeah, it's not.
That's in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
I think we should do the tourism, go back to 100. I mean, they made a good point and it benefits the whole county by providing jobs.
Yeah, was on this, or there any other things to discuss on this too? So that's one proposal, is to change that 90 back to 100. The numbers on these specific ones, any one change isn't probably gonna make much difference when you're talking about a $10 million budget. Adding a 5,000 or 10,000, it's not gonna change the percentage too much, but
We get such a good return on that investment though, for the whole county. I
Yeah.
would like to see it back to 100 too.
What really bugs me is the city don't gotta pay nothing.
no, cities.
They pay $2 per thousand. Well, they
That's
pay
all-
15,000.
All the cities pay the same rate.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
They all-
They just pay 15,000 and we gotta pay 100.
But
Well, we're.
it's
quite a
where,
bit bigger
it's
budget.
where everyone that doesn't drive
Well,
a
yeah,
tractor.
there's 7,500 versus 12,500.
But
We pay 100 and they pay 15. So that's $85,000 difference.
But everyone living outside of the cities, typically, most of them have some connection to a job that's generated by the results.
They did say their
Economic
contributions come to
development.
53,000.
Yeah.
Plus then they got in kind with the building down there too. They did not mention that.
Mhm.
So I mean, it's more than,
I don't know where we want to be there, to be honest.
I think we,
Just because I'm on the board doesn't mean it's gonna. But
Well, what they did with Maddie is very positive.
I think they deserve to continue that and see where it goes. Because it does benefit, like I said, the results benefit everybody in the county by jobs and revenue. More local option sales back, by people coming and spending. I mean, the whole thing is, it's outside money coming in that's not fixed.
anytime you can get someone outside the county to spend money here, that helps the people here to not have
that
to
helps
spend.
everybody.
And I know a lot of what they do. And like I said, just in the city of Washington, they're saving the city of Washington $20,000 by securing 2 grants for the tear down of 2 properties. So that far
Yeah.
exceeded what the city pays, but
Mhm.
you know,
Well, they got a grant too, and there was one property that was, they helped to get rid of in Calhoun.
yeah,
And I think we need to think about that
15,000.
perception issue that you brought up. that-
It's a big issue.
That can't drive our decision here. The false perception can't drive the reality that what they do benefit the whole county, and our
By,
return on investment here is amazing.
by developing the opportunities for people in the
Yes.
county from work and
And
tax revenue.
opportunities for tourism, for more
Yeah.
money in.
For tax revenue, I think that's the ultimate goal of that.
Mhm.
So the 93 cent increase, that would be like, say, a $300,000 house would be $280 a year increase then. Cause it'd be 90 93 cents per thousand, right?
Yeah, only it's on the taxable value, so residential property is around 55%.
Cent.
So a
So
$300,000 house.
60, 93, $150.
165,000, so 165 times
93.
93 is 150.
Okay.
Tolerable, given what other costs are going up.
They had a huge one last year, so. that would really be-
Well, when they look at that compared to what their insurance rates went up by.
And there was no increase last year.
Insurance rate.
And our insurance rates are going up. I
Yep.
mean, that's ultimately where
30%, it was 30%.
our costs have.
Don't know those exact figures. I think the 30% is on the property portion of our insurance. I didn't increase like our work comp, because as long as we keep a low
We are low.
multiplier, that
Yeah.
shouldn't go up like that. And I didn't increase the amount we pay Bushmans. I don't know if they're gonna ask for an increase, but I kept that flat. But I did try to figure that 30% on the property portion of our insurance. So that's what's in here for the first round.
Their share's 1,200 a year.
12,000. 12,000 a year. Yeah.
1,200.
And I wouldn't think it would be probably not unreasonable to think they'll request it, because when I started as auditor, I think it was 10. And then like 5 years into it, or so at 10, they asked to go to 11. And then about another 5 years, they asked to go to 12. And that's been about 5 years ago, I think. So it might be about time that they're gonna
It's
ask
not gonna be
again.
a
but-
hugely significant
Yeah,
number, though.
Yeah. I heard two people for the development and tourism saying to go to 100,000. What do you want me to do for the second run on that?
I like these that serve the whole county, and it really serves the whole county. It's good for all of us.
Who's in at the 100?
We're up,
Come on,
we're
let's
up
do
at
what's
50,
right
we're
for the
50,000
community
over last year on those asks.
They were at 85 2 years in a row last year.
Towards 30.
I
The
know.
fires,
Yeah.
that's a one-shot deal,
One-shot.
a one-shot deal.
And that will, it'll probably fall into next year. They'll probably have it by then. This budget.
How about
Yeah.
95?
Well,
Why not just 100? It's the right thing to do.
How about doing argue?
I
no,
always argue with you, but I'm arguing for the
Do
community.
the
here.
95, then it ain't even gonna
No.
monkey the budget at all. I
Neither
mean,
is 100.
it ain't even gonna, just do the
I think they've got it.
95, but
I think they've got to be able to keep her and do what she does. They probably need to have.
I'd say the 95, that way the 5,000 ain't gonna really matter. You ain't gonna have to move, ain't gonna change nothing.
95, is that what we have?
I'm at 95.
Okay, well, it's 10,000 over last year.
Yep.
And not 15. If they say that the city has finally backed up some more of it, which is they're at 53 and we're at 95. They're at 40% of the population and we're at 60. That's, I think they're getting off pretty. They're getting off pretty easy.
Because I do know the main reason that the hotel motel, they came in and paid it was there was no way they were gonna be able to operate without that funding. So.
There aren't very many here, if you want to go down any of them that aren't what they requested. I'm assuming
They're just.
3A, we aren't gonna worry about because we haven't funded them for several years. The next one was RSVP. Did you want to do any more than the 12? And the only other one was the fair.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to talk
You know,
about increasing
That's a
either of
big- that's a-
those, but.
RSVP doesn't have an opportunity to make more money with any changes within their own budget, really. The fair just rose button prices last year, is that right?
Can adjust them this year again.
Said they could sell sponsorships.
They have a way to generate somewhere on their own, or RSVP.
Right where to come on their facilities.
And RSVP really does also a lot for this whole community.
County.
Or that's what I mean when I say community, the whole county community.
I would be in favor of giving them more.
Guess we've been up in a couple thousand a year, and that's what we did again this year, so. We get by this year, get this way this year till we get the fire truck deal, and then next year we can look at more.
So it's 6 to 8, 8 to 10.
10 to 12. And we're doing a regular increase every year, so.
They
How
have
about if we-
such a small budget for a volunteer group. Every dollar goes a long way for them. I would
How about if we gave,
advocate for more.
how about if we gave at least half of what their increase they asked for, which would be 3,500 increase.
So does
I thought Shirley
13.50.
was just offering 14, Mark, you're cutting it back to 13.5?
Well,
I
I
didn't say a
mean,
number.
you guys are saying zero over what we've offered, so I'm just saying if they wanted a $7,000 increase, well, 3,500 would be half of that at least. If we're not gonna go the full amount. I just, like I said, the benefit they give to so many people, just with tax assistance alone and stuff is,
It's amazing.
it's amazing.
And they're all volunteers. And they're trying to increase their staff so they can do more and more, but they can't increase staff without increase in revenue.
Guess I'm satisfied where we're at, just keep doing it, and see what next year. Cause we can never, you know. This next year, if things don't go any better, if we lose evaluation next year, we're gonna be in a deep world of hurt.
Was it next year that
No, they
it was
would-
following year that they have to do the
Yeah.
complete reassessment, isn't it? Is that right from the board meeting the other night?
What's that?
The next, it's not for the 25, it's 20, is it 25 where they have to do all the reassessments, which are one for this go 26? They gotta reassess everything, commercial and residential.
Yeah, I think it was. I'm throwing all these numbers around my head because he gave us some for the mapping, for the
Yeah,
flyovers.
the other
and then
one's
he
for
gave
the-
us some
For the mass reassessments for residential
Yeah.
and commercial. I'm thinking it was, he said occurs in 25, which would hit the 26 tax year.
I still want to go back to RSVP in that it's utilizing free labor. I mean, the return on that is immeasurable, really. It's not like we're paying for what we're able to utilize people who are donating their time, not putting more people on retirement fund. Which takes the burden off of other services that have to be provided. We do have to hire people to do it.
So we've been pretty consistent going across. And if people take note on what one is raising their requests so much, you know what's gonna happen down the line
Right.
on other requests.
They see that, then they're gonna slap the big one on. Like I
That's
said,
why we have to
just
fund it.
stay at a steady pace and
I'm okay with it, with just the one change of the French County Development Tourism at 95. That's where I'm at.
I'd stay with 95. If we find a loophole where we could add on to it down the road and do it. We can always do that too, but right now I'd rather stay
So the only two
like
changes
it.
I have for the second run that so far are the increase the road clearing to 300,000 and bump Winneshiek County Development Tourism to 95 instead of 90.
Yep.
Anything else you want me to change for the second run?
It's not a real waste, but you can.
Yeah, I think until you do a little more research and talking.
Yeah.
Besides, your rural fund looks healthy enough
Yeah,
anyway.
I mean-
It cutting it right now is just gonna make that
If
look
it was
way
coming out of
overboard.
if it was coming out of our general, then we'd have
Yeah,
general supplemental fund.
but I think, I do agree that it's probably a program. I think you had a constituent email too that
Yep.
said it's a program.
Yeah,
It's not equally.
I mean, everybody else is paying their own. I
Pays.
mean, if there was 1,000 people using it, you could charge out, $100 or $150 and say, here it is. If you only got a few hundred, you're talking 400 or 500. I mean, it's 3 times or twice to 3 times is what.
Yeah, if you have a private person come in the rural, I don't know what it is, cause I don't, is it 20?
Mine's minus $207 a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Mine went right on the
I
highway.
think it's-
They just go
I
right
think it's
by.
about 20 something like it is.
Yeah,
One rural customer that I know,
so like $300 a
Yeah.
year, maybe roughly
It's not-
200 to 300.
but
so-
We're spending more than that.
we're spending a lot more.
I mean, per customer, we're spending twice, we're spending twice. So like,
Oh,
Yeah.
we-
Well, there was a conversation at the 6 county meeting about, they didn't have any, when they cut it elsewhere, they didn't have any significant issue on rural waste dumping. That was a comment that came out of the 6 county meeting. So I don't, as far as getting a bunch of trash dumping, I think our road crews and the sheriff are pretty good about tracking down who it belongs to.
Going back to the building purchase, is that? When did that?
Public, so that was signed on Friday, you signed it.
Friday.
Yep, so it's now, I mean, it's public knowledge now. So you can talk about it. It's not a done deal till I think the closing was penciled in at March 1st.
Roughly.
But that gives you time then to do the Mark's coordinating, get the appraisal and inspection and to do all those other behind the scenes things, the updating the abstract and the final opinion and all that stuff to get done between now and then.
And an easement for an awning, I talked to Shimmick about that. We'll have to go talk to the neighbor. That awning hangs over the property line. It goes out the back. It's a triangular corner of that where the walkway is. It hangs over the adjacent.
That building?
No, over at
Spectrum
the
building.
Spectrum building. There's a walkway awning that hangs just like.
So I think you can talk about it with, if you have a community action meeting or something, but it's still nothing is for sure until we get the
Close.
close. But at least now we can talk about it more openly.
So the survey has been done, or
Oh, he's been out and checked them. He surveyed the whole thing.
is there a
Check
road
the
running
pin.
through the middle, or is it just,
Is there what?
so with that property?
You come together?
Yeah,
It's
is
the
it,
property line.
there's not a third one that's in the,
The, in between like the old, where Wadsworth.
Well, I was gonna say-
Between where Wadsworth shop is and the part of the building we're not getting.
Yeah, there was,
Is there a road in there or not? Or is it just?
I don't think,
I don't
Jimmy
think
didn't
that's-
look at that.
Yeah.
because see, that's what Wadsworth would use is to get in and out.
Yeah, but that's,
So that'd be our property.
no, it wouldn't be.
No, it's not our.
That's our property.
It's
Just go to that into the.
It's
No,
one
you don't
lot,
go that
removed.
far.
It's one lot removed.
Just the two buildings, although it looks like one building, are actually two
Two
buildings
buildings.
divided in the middle.
Right,
You're only
right
getting the east side,
Yeah.
which goes to the road and not
Where
to
the-
Wadsworth.
Where the gym is next door.
Yeah, no,
That's different. And then Wadsworth, now there was talk about there was at one point, maybe there was a road right away through there, but that's city.
Yeah.
So I don't
So I
know.
didn't know if ours they had carved that out to where ours went along them.
Nothing I know of. And there's nothing on the front easements as far as all the way around it on the road and everything else. It's all the pins and everything else are all there and everything looks fine. Except for one X on the sidewalk.
Okay. Thank you.
If you guys want some interesting reading, read up on that AEA bill. Quite interesting. Governor's made some changes to her clause. She doesn't want to get rid of the AEA, but oddly enough, there won't be any boards that oversee the AEA. I went to the Department of Education, but now it doesn't go to the Department of Education, it goes to the Director of the Department of Education, has total say-so, 100% what goes on in the AEA.
What's
So let's,
the
Area education agencies, they provide
so we could
tons
just call
of
them
support.
SAR, not a director.
So oddly
And
enough,
that
you know,
director ruined Kansas public
she
schools.
appointed this director 2 years ago, so that director has all the say-so on what's gonna transpire in this.
It's
People
crazy.
really need to talk to our legislators down at Des Moines and say, fully read through this thing because it's.
Here's
not
the
a way
deal,
to live.
no Iowan, no
I'm just saying.
teacher ever brought it up as something that needed changing. It's coming from someplace else. And the same director of education really hurt Kansas.
It's interesting. That's all I'll say. How about we get out?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion second, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're out by one.
So for the roads, I just put in the maximum transfer because that's what affects your levies. He's still, we're still working with Michael to come and talk with you about the budget specifics and
Cleaning up some of the.
5-year plan and all that stuff. So we'll work on that over the next week or two.
Okay.
Requesting that you develop. It was a Super Bowl supervisor desk.
Okay.
About that, the one of them,
There's two of them, but
there's two of them, but one of them, there was two of them purchased that came from
the library had
the
them.
library. One of them Barrett got, and they both paid $100 for it. And the one from Barrett, he wanted his $100 back. I gave him the $100. That's neither here nor there. The other one is Nancy Goodall.
Okay.
It's we need a donation. She wants a donation receipt.
Okay.
For that, for the antique Winneshiek County Supervisor's desk, which is the way it's gonna go up. Learners is gonna go up in the courtroom now, and the other one's gonna just go into storage until we figure out it's gonna have a repair.
Donation receipt, do you have recommended wording or how this would?
I would just thank you for the donation to the antique Winneshiek County Supervisor's desk.
More of a thank you note
Yeah.
versus a receipt per se.
Well, it's just, this is a recognition of your donation to the county.
Okay, yeah, I can probably do that. Do we have an email address for her that I can send it to her?
I have a phone number for her is all.
Okay.
560.
Can I get that information and
Yeah.
I'll, you want
On the
the,
back of
you
my
need
note.
that? You want me here? I can take a copy.
copy of
Then
that.
I can call her, I can write up something and then call her and ask her to say if this will do before I send it to her officially.
I gotta shut down, Shirley.
That was okay.
So Fatima made it back. I see today.
Yeah,
Saw her running through the hall quickly.
Yeah,
You know, it's
quite an ordeal.
Can't imagine being stranded overseas.
Did you end the meeting before shutting down or that was something we didn't do last time?
and
Nah.
where do you put N?
I don't know. I just hit leave last time, so.
Fatima and John are taking care of this. I told them that they do it.
Okay.
I mean, that's what
So,
they told me is
yeah,
we're doing.
IT, we can end this meeting now. I mean, the only button we have is leave. So I don't know how to end it.
We leave it and they end it.
Okay. Well, that was what that email
That's
last week
right,
is. John
right.
said we needed to make sure we end it for all, but I don't think I have that. We don't have that here.
Let me call Fatima in a second to do it right.
When, was this the week of coming back up to do the sound system?
I think so. I think it's like
Email?
Wednesday or Thursday this week. Yeah.
Wow.
Wouldn't that be something?
Upwards of a year to get that thing done.
Yeah, last week I just hit leave and then John said it was like 6 hours later, it was still going or
Right.
something. But I don't see, he said you gotta end it, and I don't see that as one of our options.
See, they need to do. Let me call John.
Yeah, I don't see anything on here that would be like,
We're not hosting, well, they're hosting it there, right? So I don't know where we end it. John, we're trying to figure out on the annex end, how do we end the meeting? I know we had a discussion in email about this.
the only button I see is leave.
Oh, that's all you want us to do? There's not a down menu. It just says leave, control, shift, whatever. It doesn't give us a down menu on leave. No, just a second.
Let's see, let's click and see what it says.